Sort of Coming Chapter 1043. Qin Pingon believed that he knew the temperament of Emperor Song He, so even if the other party visited the village school in person, it would not be an accident. It just didn't occur to me that Song He and his party just stayed like this. Looking at the posture, since you, Qin Pingon, were at the dinner table and said that you would consider that matter, then we will wait for your exact answer and wait for you to think about it. Say it again. It's not being rude. At the beginning, Qin Pingon didn't know about this matter. He had eaten before and it was only delivered to the door. It was only when Song He and the others would go to the county seat or Yenzhou Fuqing to settle down. The residence was generally settled. Of course, Yu Mian and Yu were busy. The prefect Pei Tong and the general Chu Liang had returned to their respective offices. The servant Zhao Yao had also left. Song He was walking alone in the village. The thin ones are all yellow mud houses, while the more well-off ones have white walls and black tiles. There is a courtyard where the four waters return to the church. The village is covered with long blue stone slabs. Year after year, the wheels and the hooves of the cows rubbed extremely brightly, and the moonlight made it even brighter. Most of the villages have one surname. The elderly and children are arranged according to their seniority. A certain character in the middle of the name is the seniority. After Song He went out, he was only a few steps away and he was only barked by the dog more than once. To be honest, Song He was really a little frightened in his heart. Let's go back to meet someone with a limp, but it will be embarrassing. Walking and walking, Song He, who was indeed a little frightened, laughed at himself and looked around, and then Song He saw Qin Pingon at the head of the village, who was smoking dry cigarettes with a few old men. The teacher, with a relaxed attitude, crossed Erlang's legs, revealing 1,000-layer sole cloth shoes, tilted his head slightly, and slanted his shoulders, listening to the leisurely days of the old people on the side, smiling and nodding from time to time. It seems that although Qin Pingon, I am a foreigner, but I can chat with the locals very well. Farther away there were some women and girls chatting about some trivial parents. Song He just glanced a few times and found that there were several girls among them, who were quite concerned about the elegant teacher. Seeing Song He's figure, Qin Pingon directly took a breath of dry smoke. After all, he is an emperor and he does such a bad thing. He should be picking up pork sticks on the 30th New Year's Eve and coming to collect the debt. Seeing this scene, Song He restrained his laughter and sat silently beside Qin Pingon. The so-called bench is actually a long wooden board, resting on top of 2 stacks of blue bricks. Poor His Majesty the Emperor, half of his is hanging in the air. Qin Pingon had to move his position to make room for Song He. Song He didn't understand the local dialect here, so Qin Pingon helped to explain. It turned out that they were talking about a big event. Yesterday, an old man in the village passed away and he was considered dead, but just because the old man did not have the same surname as the village, according to the local customs, it is forbidden to enter the village ancestral hall to set up a mourning hall. The younger generation of the old man was not happy, and threatened that if the ancestral hall did not open again, they would break into the door tonight. Song He asked, "If it's Mr. Qin, how should we solve it?" Qin Pingon shook his head and smiled. "One is filial piety and the other is customs. How can this kind of thing be solved? There is no way to solve it." A barefooted boy caught a strange fish with long beards and a huge head from the black quagmire that prayed for rain. The whole body was golden yellow and it had to be as long as an adult's arm. It was curled around the boy's waist. Inside the fish basket. Passing by the head of the village, Qin Pingon glanced at the fish basket, called the boy's name and beckoned. The young man walked quickly to Qin Pingon and called out, "Mr. Qin." Qin Pingon smiled and nodded in greeting, and then plucked the fish basket with the bamboo stick in his hand. The young man glanced at Song He next to Qin Pingon and mistakenly thought that his husband wanted to entertain guests tonight, open a small stove and have a late-night snack together. What? The young man took off the fish basket from his waist without hesitation and handed it to Mr. Qin. Qin Pingon waved his hand and spoke in a vernacular that Song He couldn't understand. The young man was stunned for a moment, glanced at Qin Pingon, nodded vigorously, put the fish basket away again and ran away. Song He asked in a low voice, "Mr. Qin, what's going on?" Qin Pingon didn't give an answer right away. He just lifted the cigarette stick, pointed to a distant hill, and told Song He about the rain-praying experience of the black quagmire. There is a faint golden line on the back of both. Qin Pingon took the cigarette stick and pointed to the mountain behind him, saying that there is the highest place and the local people call it Xiaoshenlong, which is a saying passed down from generation to generation. Song He, however, is a serious person. To speak of strange legends, as the king of a country in the Dali dynasty, I have heard of it a lot, and it is not uncommon to see it, and asked, it's really the kind of Jiaolong who was relegated to the left and moved from the Dragon Palace in the early years in the Black Quagmire. To rest, you need to be imprisoned in one place. How many years will you walk through the clouds and rain so that you can make up for your faults? Qin Pingon smiled and said, it's all stories that have been passed down from generation to generation here. It's true or false. It's hard to say what the facts are. If I had known you would ask this question earlier, I would have asked Lu Qin to the bottom of it and asked him to help with the deduction. Play. Song He stabilized his mind and asked softly, has Master Lu been here? Qin Pingon nodded. I've just been here. It can be said that Headmaster Lu walked on the front foot and you came on the back foot. Song He suddenly realized that the disappearance of Zhu Lu, the assistant officer of the weaving bureau in the previous team, was mostly inseparable from the Baiyujing Headmaster Lu. Song He asked curiously, did Mr. Qin persuade the young man to let the fish go? Is it something about cultivating on the mountain? Qin Pingon explained with a smile. This actually has nothing to do with the mountains. It is an old saying in my hometown and it is indeed a bit taboo. Relying on mountains to eat mountains and water to drink water, you have to believe this, let alone believe this you can still what do you believe? Many things were discovered after going out. For example, in my hometown and here, whoever went up the mountain and along the stream to catch the stone frog would break a leg before releasing it. You can't take it home. Song He said, is it a way of paying respect to the mountain god? Qin Pingon nodded, that's right. If I encounter a three-legged stone frog on the mountain later, whether it's half an hour up the mountain or an hour to catch it, I'll have to go home. Then today something like that boy, if you catch a big fish that looks weird and even a little frightened at a glance, you need to see the appearance of the strange fish. If it is bitter you can kill it and eat it, it doesn't matter. That smiling face, it's best to let go. Song He was silent for a moment, then sighed for no reason. In the final analysis, it doesn't matter whether you rely on mountains or water or rely on the sky for food. Qin Pingon remained silent, breathing heavily. The hometown dialect and the local dialect also have a mysterious and unreasonable connection. Whenever we talk about the seasonal climate, whether it is hot or cold, the villagers will get used to the local dialect and use 3 words or start or end. This is God. There was nothing to complain about in his tone. At the most helpless, he looked up at the sky and sighed. The peasants who face the fields and turn their backs to the sky will naturally be beautiful when they meet the good seasons and good years. Song He obviously endured the thick smoke here. Qin Pingon put away the cigarette stick, said goodbye to the old men, and took Song He for a walk outside the village. Song He asked, what did Mr. Qin just chat with a young and strong man? Qin Pingon said, that person is very nice. He is the father of Meng Tong in a village school. His family is relatively poor. He is a mason. They are old and young. He is willing to do any work that can make money. He carries trees and burns charcoal to raise silkworms. Picking tea, doing everything. I don't have enough alcohol, but I especially like to drink, and the quality of the wine is a little bad. I was just trying to persuade him to be a little bit more restrained at the wine table. Don't drink so hard and drink a few glasses as soon as you get to the wine table. Yes, I can't stop it. If I drink too much, I'll go crazy and dare to say anything. I just made a joke and said that you are not a drinker but a drinker. Fortunately, he didn't get angry when he heard it. And then persuade him at the wine table. Don't always say that other people's is not or not. A villager in a village, looking up and not looking down to see, maybe even the whispers in the bed will be listened to by the wall. Not to mention this kind of drinking table talk. If you don't make a few drunk words, you will hate others and you will be held grudges for nothing. As time goes by, the generation of the same generation will not talk about it, and the next generation will be burdened with it. Hearing this, Song He felt very interesting and asked with a smile, does he think it makes sense? Qin Pingon said, I probably heard it now, but I don't know if I will remember it next time I go to the wine table. Don't talk about anything else, just talk about drinking, including Qin Pingon himself. Really learn a lot from Jingqing at the wine table. I think everyone is amazing and they are all heroes and heroes in the world. The key is honesty. Because Qin Lingjun's drinking words were his heartfelt words. Song He took care of himself and explained a rationale. As the saying goes, the room is in anger and the city is in color. It is good to know the sound by the ear and the shape by the eye, but the knowledge must be seen by the heavenly officials. It should be written down and then it can be done. There is no fixed name and it is appropriate to make an appointment with it. It is appropriate to make a convention, and it is inappropriate if it is different from an appointment. Qin Pingan smiled and nodded. Song He is using a different way to say good things about his husband. Song He showed a look of nostalgia, looked straight ahead and said softly, Mr. once told me that there was a very talented Luzong monk. Before he became a monk he said 2 words very well, saying that the virtue of the world is the best. Those who see people's strengths and weaknesses are desirable, so there are many people who allow them. Those who have poor morals are arrogant in their hearts, seeing good and bad things in people, so they despise them in their eyes. Finally, the road gets wider and wider and the ladder will only get narrower. Probably a person with such a realm can see that the streets are full of saints, and everyone in the world is not a good person. Qin Pingan took the cigarette stick and wrapped his hand behind him, tapped his back lightly, nodded and said with a smile, It's His Majesty's reasoning, more knowledgeable and more gentle. Song He said, These are the teachings of Mr. Qin Pingan said, Since you have listened to it, it is your reason. Song He Yuemal felt that the atmosphere and timing of the walk tonight were good, so they began to meet frankly and express their inner thoughts. Scholarly and elegant people like to say that the wind and the moon are impermanent, and only the idle are the masters. To be honest, I am when I went south, the original intention was to stop at the Logging Institute in Yuzhong County, Hangzhou. The reason why I diverted to this place was a spur of the moment. I was afraid that Mr. Qin would be too disappointed in our Dali dynasty, and he would not be afraid of laughing when he said it. Dare to remind Pei Tong of Yunzhou and Wu Yuan of Chuzhou. These top officials who seem to be officials under Mr. Chen's eyes are afraid of extracurricular troubles and superfluous extravagance. After being seen through, they are worried that they will only lead to bigger jokes. On the way here I saw a plum tree beside the bridge in the riverside and I stopped there for a while. I was afraid of Mr. Chen's current state of mind and he would be displeased. What should I do with Dilly? I just thought about it again. If it is really a plum blossom in the ancient stream and the road is far and deep in the mountains, I will wait for the bright moon to find me. It would be fine. Even if I can eat a closed door at Mr. Chen's side, I have a clear conscience. Instead of expressing the slightest approval, Qin Pingan took an inch and made a joke. Oh? Do you have a clear conscience? Song He was dumbfounded for a while. Why do you think that you are not as good as a country villager who is not good at wine? So you need to let Mr. Qin be patient and pay attention to his sense of proportion. Qin Pingan smiled and said, An inch of time is worth an inch of gold. Who are you telling such a good truth? I'm afraid that if a scholar can hear it, it's already very good. Song He had an illusion as if he had returned to his teenage years. He listened to the teacher who served as the national teacher and took him to the streets of the capital. When encountering personnel he would say what kind of truth. At the wine table here Qin Pingan once heard something. There is no name in life. When the old man said this he neither drank too much nor complained, but his tone was indifferent and his expression calm. Song He said apologetically, I am a soft-hearted person. Don't mind Mr. Qin. Song He is still worried that his wife will make her own decisions, because the string of rhinoceros beads makes Qin Pingan unhappy. Furthermore, it was Queen Song Mion's opinion that they stayed here this time. It's just this kind of thing. Song He doesn't mention it on Qin Pingan's side. Qin Pingan turned to look at Song He. Not polite words but heartfelt words. Yes. All the spies who want to come to the Great Wall of Sword Qi are handled by senior brother Cui Yu himself, not others. As long as the emperor knew a little about the news on the Sword Qi Great Wall, he would not say such things tonight. Oh, the entire Great Wall of Sword Qi in those days, regardless of the reputation of the hidden officials of the Summer Palace and the second shopkeeper of the wine shop, only said that he and Ning Yao were one of the family. One was considerate who didn't give a thumbs up and was strict with his wife. Nothing. I remember eating hot pot with Senior Song once. The chili was drunk and the young man's face flushed after drinking it. It is unavoidable that a man, after being powerful and rich, is liked or admired by women of all kinds, and he is still able to control it, and this is his real ability. Over time, let them understand a truth. I am the man you will never get. This is called a good man. I think when I was young, when I was in the arena, Ying and Yen around me had never been less, and I just relied on the righteousness to dispel the fat and powder. Marry a wife and marry a virtuous person. Qin Pingan smiled and said, Your Majesty is very lucky. If it weren't for a certain detail, Qin Pingan temporarily changed his mind. I don't care about Your Majesty the Emperor and the Governor General. After drinking tea you can see off guest. He would never leave Song and his group for that meal. If it wasn't for the Queen Yu Mian handing over the bracelet, let the Queen Mother Nanpin come to the school to try it out? Let's see if Qin Pingon will let Xiaomo remove the ban on swordsmanship. You must know that when Qin Pingon was in the palace, he deliberately left a green bamboo chopstick and let the woman use it as a hairpin. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "A man who has a family and lives, don't let his daughter-in-law be in trouble all the time." All the contradictions between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, if one day they are irreconcilable in the final analysis, it must be the same man. He is unreliable and has no opinion. Song He felt that these words were very reasonable but they sounded a little guilty. Qin Pingon asked, "Zhao Shilang is still in the village?" Song He shook his head and said, "He has already left the territory of Yunzhou. To deal with an urgent matter, he may have to bring half of the earthly branch cultivators and travel separately to meet in Luojing, the companion capital." Qin Pingon hesitated for a moment and asked, "What kind of official business does it require a servant of the Ministry of Punishment to send out with the earthly branch cultivator?" Song He didn't hide anything. Abbot Dali Jianzhou and a key figure in the affairs of Xianyue Ferry, this old man did not take a temporary job in the Ministry of Industry, and rarely took a break, so he took a few disciples and students to the south to relax. An old vassal state south of Dadu encountered a dispute involving the local court and the two immortal mansions on the mountain. Qin Pingon asked, "Because it's not particularly dominant? Suspected of meddling?" Song He nodded and said, "If it weren't for that, in Aquarius Island north of the old dragon city, no one would dare to stir up trouble with the Dali dynasty. Besides, this old gentleman is stubborn and in trouble. He doesn't want to be with him at all." The Capital Punishment Department or the capital Luojing said hello, and they were deadlocked there. Qin Pingon asked again, "For such an important person, the Ministry of Punishment did not issue a peace card?" Song He explained, "I'll say anything, but the old man is still only willing to charge a last-class no-mind card. Because the old man was worried that the people around him would be implicated, he had to be stubborn and showed the no-mind card." Qin Pingon twitched the corners of his mouth. Did the other party get more excited when he saw this last-minute card? Maybe he wanted to take this opportunity to knock the mountain and shake the tiger? Song He nodded. "Everything is as Mr. Qin expected." Qin Pingon narrowed his eyes. To put it uglier, today's Dali dynasty without the embroidered tiger Chuiyu is equivalent to the lack of the backbone. This is actually a fact that is recognized on the mountain and down the mountain, and the Dali dynasty has acquiesced in this. Just talking about the old vassals of Dali in the south, why did they take the initiative to release the news after the restoration of the country, and they wanted to destroy the stone tablets on the top of the Immortal Mansion within their jurisdiction? In fact, it is a kind of temptation to Dali Song. As long as Chuiyu is still there, the entire Aquarius, whether in the north or in the south, is just like what Emperor Song He said, who dares to say anything to the north of the old dragon city, the southernmost point of the continent? Seeing Mr. Qin pondering on the side, Song He smiled and said, "Mr. Qin, don't worry, this kind of thing will definitely be handled when Zhao Yao goes." Qin Pingon opened his mouth and said, "Among the chi practitioners who are visiting my Luopao mountain now, there is Jade Pure Realm Sword Cultivator Bai Deng, who has just walked out of the nearby Dragon Palace ruins, and he can be regarded as half a local cultivator of Dali, and there is another one. The ghost, the Taoist name of Yinlu, was once the deputy city owner of the wild fairy hairpin city. This fellow is no longer in his realm and his heart is still there, so he can cooperate with Bai Deng, who is naturally short-tempered. In addition, Luxia's King Gongshen Jinghao. This time around I also followed a high apprentice from the Jade Purity realm named Gao Geng. I can invite the three of them to go with me, and then let Yinlu and the old gentleman recognize a family elder. They can settle this situation without Zhao Yao and the others showing up. The disputes can be big or small, and the other party is willing to make trouble, so let Yinlu follow along. When the time comes, let Daoist Gao Geng reveal his identity and say that he is from Qinggong Mountain in Luxiazu, and he is still the old gentleman's family guest. One is official business like Zhao Yao with the title of a servant. There is another way that is to be private. Let the silver deer, who is also idle every day on the mountain, recognize his ancestors and return to his ancestors. Song He was stunned. Does this work? Qin Pingon didn't seem to be concerned about it anymore. He had already changed the topic, pointed to a mountain ridge ahead and said with a smile, "It's a coincidence, that place is called Xianxia Mountain." Song he eased his mind, followed the direction pointed by Qin Pingon, looked at the distant mountain and said with a smile, "Every time I talk to Mr. it will suddenly become clear," and Mr. suddenly throws another question, adding more confusion on top of the confusion. Qin Pingon joked, "Comparing me with senior brother Cui is equivalent to scolding us both at the same time." Song he asked tentatively, "Mr. Qin, then we have an appointment?" Qin Pingon nodded, "But I have to wait for me to go out for a trip first. I may go to many places and several continents that I have never set foot on, need to go and see. When I come back I will go to the capital of Dali. This time traveling takes 4 or 5 years, as long as 2 or 3 years as short as possible." Song he was in high spirits, one couldn't hold back, grabbed Qin Pingan's arm. "It's settled." Qin Pingon patted His Majesty the Emperor's arm and said with a smile, "Your Majesty doesn't have to do this. If you can run, a monk can't run away from the temple, and my family's Luapa mountain doesn't have long legs." Song he looked back at the direction of the school, but he hesitated. Qin Pingon explained with a smile, 10 years to build trees and 100 years to cultivate people. Teaching and educating people must be rewarded for a long time. When I go out for a long trip I will leave a talisman avatar in the village school, and I will definitely open a library and teach careers. It won't give up halfway." Song he stopped, straightened his clothes, stood sideways and bowed his thanks to Qin Pingon. Qin Pingon had to stand opposite him and return the salute. Another good meal tonight. Everyone had drank the wine and had enough to eat. They went back to their respective houses. Qin Lingjun and his good brother Qin Zhuoyo went out for a walk. Everyone made an appointment for breakfast tomorrow. Those who accompanied Qin Xianjun to drink, what else could be done, all said. Qin Lingjun hasn't shaken his arms like this for a long time and has been drinking and bragging. Luopao Mountain is like a temporary hilltop. Qin Lingjun is the host and is responsible for hospitality. In addition to his close friend Qin Zhuoyo, there are several new friends who have just met. The old immortal Jing Hao, the sword repairer by Deng the Ghosting Lu, and the direct disciple of Jing Hao, Jade Pujing, whose name is Gao Gong, is relatively late at night. Fortunately, there are a lot of empty houses in Jisifeng. This is thanks to Chief Shou's great spending, not treating immortal money as money. To say that Chief Shou's money alone is not enough, and the old cook is a top spender. The money man, the civil engineering in the mountains, are all handmade by the old cooks, making the mansions on the mountain each have their own characteristics, and they are used to entertain the monks on the mountain. Every time they drank, Qin Lingjun and Qin Zhuoyo would often take a walk all the way to Jilin Peak Patriarch's Hall and then go back. In any case, it was true that they fell in love with those new friends and it was very easy to chat, but Qin Lingjun and Qin Zhuoyo were friends through adversity, brothers who had passed away, and they really got to know each other. Walking on the mountain road, Qin Lingjun rubbed his hands together, a little embarrassed. After Qin Qinglu put his hands together, he smiled and said, "Is there something to discuss? Just can't speak?" Qin Lingjun said, "My mountain master accidentally told me about it. It seems that Wei Shanjun admires Mr. Xian very much and wants to ask for 2 copybooks. Good things come in pairs." In fact, until now, Qin Qinglu didn't mention it and Qin Pingon didn't mention it, so Qin Lingjun didn't know the origin of Mr. Xian, and he didn't bother to ask about it. As long as he believed that he was a friend of Qin Zhuoyo, it would be meaningless to ask questions. Do you know that the other party is a person who lives on a certain big mountain, so he should be more attentive to toast at the table, and if he has no background he must be neglected? There is no such reason to meet at a wine table by fate. Qin Qinglu glanced at the boy in Tsing-yi and said with a smile, 800 jinkings together are not as good as Qin Pingon alone. What good things come in pairs. He clearly wants 2 pictures and he secretly withholds another one. Afterwards, Weibo will be grateful to Qin Pingon. If I remember correctly, on Julien's side, Qin Pingon had already deceived a copybook and good things come in pairs, but he was right. Don't talk nonsense. Asking for a copybook is my own idea. It has nothing to do with the master. The master just mentioned it casually and I remembered it. Qin Lingjun complained, "Besides, what's wrong with this? Brother, don't be so rude, just say whether to help or not. You talk a lot. You have to be heart to heart. I treat all your friends as my own. How could you hide my master from behind?" For so many years in Luopao Mountain, Qin Lingjun admitted that he had not made any contribution and felt very uncomfortable. What's more, Weibo is stingy on his side. Stingy is stingy, but the relationship between Wei Shanjun and the master is really good. Just talking about Nujiadu, it is Pai Yunshan and Dali Song's matchmaking. There is a share, this love. Qin Lingjun feels that he is in his heart thinking about it and can't take it lightly. When he thinks of Piyun Mountain in Beiyue, he will think of Yao Banquet and he will have the nickname that moves the world, Wei Yao, and Qin Lingjun couldn't help laughing. Qin Qinglu nodded and said, "It's not a big deal." If someone else went to ask for a copybook, Xianxia would not answer. It's just that he opened his mouth and said 2 words. It's not difficult for a bunch of things, and it's not the kind of work that pays and sings. Every word must be full of energy. Qin Lingjun was not polite and said, "Then it's on you, let's say it. This time is not bragging about the wine table. Don't let my pigeons go. When the time comes I will scold people. Come on, don't be vague." Qin Qinglu asked with a smile, "Since you have asked for help, why not ask for more pictures?" Qin Lingjun raised his head and asked, "Is it really possible? Isn't it difficult?" Qin Qinglu nodded. Qin Lingjun rubbed his chin, shook his head and said, "Forget it, 2 copybooks are enough, and if you want more it's not very particular about it. The old cook is right, asking the calligrapher for words should be less and more refined. Many." Qin Qinglu smiled and said, "Zhou Xian is a rare and wonderful person." Qin Lingjun laughed and said, "No matter how complicated the knowledge of the old cook is, he is still an old bachelor." Qin Lingjun took out 2 jugs of wine from his sleeves and handed Qin Qinglu a jug. Naturally, he didn't know how rare it was for the extremely arrogant Qin Qinglu to make such an evaluation. Qin Qinglu took the wine jug, lifted the mud seal, shook it a few times, and the aroma of the wine filled the air. Looking at the moonlit mountain scenery, he sighed sincerely, "The moonlight on this mountain is charming, and it is the most attractive to people's hearts." Qin Lingjun took a sip of wine and said, "Sometimes I think that you are talking like Brother Jia. There are always a few good words, such as 2 days inside and outside the wine glass. Another example is that you can't compete for the first place outside the wine table, so you have to drink. Can't we fight for the table?" Qin Qinglu said with a smile, "I often hear you talk about this Zhou Xian. I have a chance to meet him." Qin Lingjun said, "It's a small matter. If one day our brothers are all together and drinking at the same table, it will be happy. A wine table together with himself, the old Taoist Zhou Xian, the driver in vain, and the scholar Qin Zhuoyou." Qin Qinglu said, "There may be a friend of Xianxia who will come to Aquarius in the near future. If Xianxia is still in Luopao Mountain at that time, the other party may visit the mountain." Qin Lingjun patted his chest, "It's not a big deal, it's on me." Qin Qinglu said with a smile, "The origin is not small and the temper is very big, you take it easy." Qin Lingjun walked with the wind, he smiled in his own Luopao Mountain in this Beiyue realm. What kind of strange person has he not seen in these years? Have you ever been cowardly? Don't talk about those 3 anymore. Anyway, if you want to talk you can't open your mouth, then just say Bai Yujing is instructing Lu Qin. So what? I've met him several times. When is it that I'm not arrogant, neither humble nor arrogant? Lu Qin is a disciple of Daozu and his origins are large enough. Qin Qinglu smiled. Xianxian's friend, in terms of seniority, is the same as Lu Qin on the mountain. This person is the proud disciple of the most holy master, and he can add the suffix one, or not. Bai Deng, who only walked out of the Dragon Palace ruins a few days ago, is quite familiar with the deputy city owner of Xianzhu City with the Taoist name Yinlu. They are both dumb and can't say how hard it is to eat Huanglian. I really don't dare to say it. I feel in addition to drinking, every day is to prepare for the next drink. Bai Deng originally wanted to learn more about the vast world today, especially the customs of Aquarius, through this drinking friend, but as soon as he asked he was blinded, and Yinlu also thought and felt the same way. Bai Deng and Yinlu don't really have a good relationship. It's just that in the mountains they have to find a chat to relieve their boredom, otherwise it will be too embarrassing. Jing Hao and his direct disciple Gao Gong lived in a house. Tonight they were together under the eaves, sitting leisurely on the moonlit night. Gao Gong carefully asked, "Master, are we spending so much time? It doesn't seem to be a problem to always accompany Qin Xianjun to drink like this. Qinggongshan is not a small sect with a lot of business. Many of the schedules set by the council at the end of last year have long been full. The master is okay, I can still chat a few words at the wine table here, but unfortunately, Gao Gong, who is also a hero on the Wuxia mountain, is always to accompany the last seat. Don't say every word, just every word. Must be considered carefully." Now Gao Gong only feels that after he goes down the mountain and returns to his hometown, he may not want to drink for a few years. There are too many oddities here. The gatekeeper at the foot of the mountain is a fake Daoist who likes to read illegitimate and forbidden books. The man who often carries the burden of wine to the house seems to be a pure martial artist with a very impressive martial arts level, and he seems to be a native of Lizhu Cave, the incumbent janitor of Luopao Mountain. There was a female martial artist named Sin who practiced boxing and walking on the mountain road every day. Even if she saw a young hidden officer, she never greeted her. The little water monster that patrols the mountain twice every morning and evening is actually the right protector of Luopao Mountain, and a mountain protector of the Xianxia worships it. And that young man with a yellow hat and blue shoes and a gentle smile often accompanies the little girl in black. The master said that this amiable Mr. Imo must be an Ascension Realm Sword Immortal. There is no doubt about it. There is also a girl named Xianxia with a green inkstone hanging around her waist. She is said to be the direct disciple of a young hidden official. She is followed by 2 helping dog legs. One is a sable-cap girl, who makes the master jealous. And there was a boy with white hair who met Gao Geng on the road and liked to laugh at him deliberately. For such a sect, Gao Geng couldn't understand it, and it was even more difficult to follow the local customs. Jing Hao and this incompetent direct disciple sat on a bamboo chair said to have been woven by Zhou Xian, the great butler of Luopao Mountain. Listening to this nonsense of the disciple, Jing Hao, who was in a good mood, suddenly had a gloomy face, and when he noticed the change in master's breath, Gao Geng immediately shut up. Why is Jing Hao willing to waste time here? For Qin Xianjun, who is extrajudicial to Qinggong Mountain, Jing Hao has long made a decision, so he must keep it at a distance. Toast with the brother and brother, who are both surnamed Qin. I can't wait to put the wine bowl under the table, it can't be lower. As a matter of fact, the boy in Tsingyi was completely confused. As a result, it blocked Qin Xianjun's eyes and warned Jing Hao with his heart, why don't you lie on the ground and make a toast? After a long silence, Jing Hao said, what is Qin Xianjun going down the mountain? You can follow me to say goodbye to Qin Yingguan. Gao Geng nodded. There was a sentence that was really unpleasant and he said in his heart, Master, this fellow Daoist Jing Qing is very courageous and a hero. After a rough calculation, the blue-clothed child of the nascent soul realm water flood dragon patted Qin Xianjun on the shoulder no less than 30 times, bent his fingers and sighed, and he really dared to bounce it on Qin Xianjun's forehead. Jing Hao looked complicated. Each has its own destiny, so I can't be envious. Xing Yi Xiaotong and Brother Huan returned from Jiling Peak to Jisa Peak. After they separated, they threw their sleeves and burped wine. They passed by and saw that the courtyard door was not closed. Man looked so pathetic. Qin Lingjun swayed to Zhu Lian's side, sat on the bamboo chair beside him, shook his shoulders and walked to Zhu Lian's side with the chair, deliberately opened his mouth and spit at the old cook. Old cook, well, it's been a long night, I can't sleep, huh, miss a girl? Zhu Lian lay still, just using the fan to disperse the alcohol. Going for a walk with Qin Zhuoyo again? Qin Lingjun was still talking to himself over there. Old cook, I'm not telling you, there are some things, we men have to accept our fate when they are getting old. Brother Dafeng may be able to deceive a little bit. Daughter-in-law goes home. Well, she doesn't pay much attention to her appearance anyway. Brother Dafeng is a little bit better. They always say that they are just a girl. They don't have any requirements. The bed is walking. Zhu Lian shook the fan gently, smiled and said, is there anything more demanding than not asking? Brother Dafeng is in high spirits. He's also a good drinker. He usually sees the world with drunken eyes and hazy eyes. Xing Dafeng is cold-eyed and warm-hearted. Some people are purely greedy for cups. As for Qin Lingjun, it probably belongs to the third category. Just don't reason with this, Uncle Qin. It's not about the left ear going in and the right ear going out. It's nothing but brains. Zhu Lian asked, have you been drinking enough these days? Qin Lingjun shook his head. It's not fun, but it's not fun. If you drink too much, you should vomit. After you've vomited, drink again. Be happy. I met Qin Zhuoyo after a long absence. The two brothers are both open and bright people. Qin Zhuoyo didn't hide it. He said that his cross-continental travel was just a tour of the mountains and water, and he didn't encounter any difficulties. Qin Lingjun was relieved when he heard such a small matter of sesame and mung beans, and was happy for his good brother. As the old cook said, if there is nothing today, it is a good thing. At the same time, I have a little regret. I have 18 martial arts, but unfortunately the hero has no place to use it. I really want to put it into trouble no matter what. I have to help my brother to breathe a sigh of relief. That stupid girl from Wanshu has been doing well these past few days, serving tea and water, stir-frying snacks, bringing vegetables and fruits. Well-organized and unambiguous. After going back and forth, she also became familiar with Qin Lingjun's friends. Qin Zhuoliu asked her a question before, listening to your mountain master saying that you have not yet established a golden elixir. But what's the difficulty? Qin Wanshu just smiled and shook his head. When the girl in the pink skirt left the house, Qin Qinglu asked the boy in Xingyi again if she is not in a hurry. You are not in a hurry? Qin Lingjun laughed, ha ha ha. The boy in Xingyi smiled and then stopped talking, scratching his head. Qin Qinglu smiled and said that the little girl was from Wenyunhua Python, and it was not easy to succeed in walking. Qin Lingjun was a little strange at the time that his master even told his brother this kind of thing. After thinking about it, Qin Lingjun finally came up with an answer, thinking that the master was on his friend's side, deliberately giving himself face. In addition, both of them are scholars and they feel the same way as Qin Zhuoliu, but they don't see the outside world. If the master is present, can't I mention 3 first? Qin Zhuoliu finally asked Qin Lingjun if Qin Wanshu goes to the hydration jiao someday in the future, does he need his help to protect the little girl? As for the reason, it is very turbid. It is said that everyone is surnamed Qin anyway, and it is fate, not to mention that the food and wine these days cannot be eaten for nothing. Qin Lingjun was immediately amused. Originally he was standing on the bench and laughing, but his stomach hurt from laughing. He was lying on the table, beating on the table with one hand and pointing at the good buddy with one hand. Then Qin Lingjun started toasting Jing Lao Xian by Jianxian and the others in turn, leaving Qin Qinglu to the side. But I don't know that those who were toasted, one was trembling with an embarrassed smile, carefully looking at Qin Xianzhen's face, one who could go to see his ancestors at any time. His teeth were trembling and he didn't dare to look at the dragon slayer. Such a pair of brothers and sisters at the wine table are indeed suffering. Daoist Jingqing, they are all friends, so why are you pitting us? Brother Jingqing, is there anyone you are afraid of? Do you need brother help this, eh? While speaking, Qin Qinglu raised his palm and made a gesture of raising his hand and dropping the knife. Qin Lingjun likes Qin Zhuoliu the most. He doesn't know who he is when he gets to the wine table, and he has the same virtue as himself. Few really have to worry about it in the master's hometown. Who is not afraid? Over the years, Qin Lingjun seems to have suffered losses because of his speaking honestly. Now every meal is a memory of bitterness and sweetness. Qin Qinglu smiled playfully. Then say a name and a Taoist name, but who are you more afraid of? Qin Lingjun subconsciously looked at Jing Hao, a great Ascension Realm cultivator. Of course he was not afraid of his drinking friend Jing Hao, but because he was afraid of these old gods who liked to pretend to be passers-by when they were full. It was only said that the blacksmith Yuan, who was the last sage in the blacksmith shop in the small town, looked like a peasant man, so Qin Lingjun was blunt and made a misunderstanding. Jing Hao was taken aback. Fellow Daoist Jingqing, what the are you staring at me for? Qin Lingjun's face was full of resentment, but when he thought of a certain person he was not the one he was most afraid of. Qin Lingjun shivered and hurriedly drank to suppress his shock. Afraid? Why not be afraid? After walking away, especially when I heard that the other party showed up at the meeting at the Confucian temple in China, Qin Lingjun had a big headache and now he has been worrying about something. Just relying on your own aptitude for cultivation and diligence, don't you turn into that real dragon by accident, and then you won't be able to find the dragon slayer? It's just this kind of thing. It's a bit embarrassing to say it. He has a thin skin and is too embarrassed to talk to the master about it. No matter how old-fashioned the rivers and lakes are, and no matter how smart he is in dealing with the world, he can't bear the great power of the dragon-slaying battle 3,000 years ago. Therefore, the first page of the collection of passers-by carefully compiled by Qin Lingjun is empty. I didn't even dare to write that person's name. Then I simply used paste to glue the page to the cover. It seems that in this way there is no need to pass by the legendary dragon slayer. At the wine table at that time, the boy in Xingyi taught the poor scholar Qin Zhuoliu in turn, don't think that you have learned some fairy tricks on the mountain and you always shout about fighting and killing. The rivers and lakes are not so mixed up. Be kind to others, be a person and stay in the front line to meet you in the future. Dino. Qin Lingjun was complacent. Old cook, I have talked to my good brother and I will ask him to ask Mr. Exon to write 2 copybooks for help. One is left by me and I will give it to you. In this way I will not waste your favor. The other picture, let the master pass it on to Weibo. I will agree with the master in advance, not to mention my credit. Weibo is hypocritical, good-natured. I know that it is my help. It is estimated that it will be in the stomach, I muttered. Even if he got a baby it wouldn't be so happy. Zhu Lian smiled and said, You don't keep your name for good deeds. Qin Lingjun crossed his arms around his chest and raised his eyebrows. I learned it from the master. Zhu Lian said, Wei Bo will be overjoyed when he receives this gift, even if he knows it's your help. Qin Lingjun was busy with his own happiness, so he didn't chew out the meaning behind Zhu Lian's words. Zhu Lian knew that there were only a handful of people Wei Bo admired in his life. In addition to the swordsman A Liang, who was born in the Yaxing mansion, there was also Mr. Long Xin, who was temporarily absent from the mountains and went out to travel. The proud disciple of Be Braver Than Me, as one of the first group of ancient scholars, who followed the most holy master. This person once left to future generations eloquent saying that seems like 1,000-year-old saying, when a gentleman dies his crown is inevitable. Qin Lingjun lowered his voice and said, Old cook, if you want to tell the truth about your personal experience it's not good for you, but the big truth in your mouth is always a set of sets. She won't leave if she stays. What's the matter? But don't look at my master. If that's the case, I'm not used to her. Everything is easy to say, but this is the only thing that can't be confused. Zhu Lian said, Don't think too much, it has nothing to do with love between men and women, just a person who really wants to make money, suddenly entered the Golden Mountain and Silver Mountain, dazzled, always want to hug more and go home. Qin Lingjun wondered, What do you mean? Let's make it clearer. Zhu Lian explained patiently, Gao Jun is now the #1 person in the Blessed Land, although it is true that the situation is not true, but in the Lotus Root Blessed Land after all she is the one who holds the bull's ear on the mountain. The further back she goes, the higher she is, the more prestige she has, plus she has the kind of idea of seeking political affairs in her position. She will worry that her virtue is not suitable, so when she comes here she is like a frog watching the sea, seeing everything is new. She just wanted to learn more about the rules, so she would make plans early after she went back, gather as many forces on the mountain as possible, twist the hearts of Qi practitioners into a rope, and finally win more for the Blessed Land on the Luopa mountainside. The freedom. The heart is good. If there is no accident, Gao Jun returns to the Blessed Land, and the sun will follow her to participate in a mountain discussion, and first give the rules and regulations of a world. Xiaomo will definitely follow. Xiago heard that there was such a stubble before, so she was eager to try it. The reason is very good. I must not support the mountain owner. Understandably, sect leader Gao really has a heart. Qin Lingjun snorted and asked again. What about Zhou Xian? I heard that he is the first golden-bodied martial artist in our Lotus Root Blessed Land. If you don't ask the mountain master to be beaten, you don't have to ask for advice from your fellow villager? If it is said that Gao Jun, the head of the Hushan sect of Songlai Kingdom, is the first golden elixir immortal in the orthodox sense of Blessed Land, and has his own God's will, protection, then the first golden elixir realm martial artist Zhou Xian is invisible. There is Wu Yun in the middle and Gao Jun, both of them are lucky people favored by God. It's just that Zhou Xian arrived at Luopao Mountain, which was the opposite of Gao Jun usually. He didn't bother to show his face. It was said that he dipped in sauce and gnawed green onions every day, and only knew how to drink alone. Zhu Lian shook his head and said, He doesn't dare to come. Even if he does, he really won't dare to come in the future. In the past, the 4 people in the picture scroll of Lotus Flower Blessed Land were all the first people in the world in their respective eras. Generally speaking, they are the kind of masters who are kind on the surface, but look down on the other 3 in their hearts. Verb. Move. Generally speaking, if the Qi practitioners on the mountain are old and have a long Taoist age, they may have an innate advantage, and the young people behind them are relatively difficult to stand out and emerge. But pure martial arts, Zhu Lian felt that one mountain had to be higher than the other. Martial arts together, there is absolutely no need to thicken the past and thin the present. Just like Howren World, the first person at the top of martial arts, there is Zhang Tiaoxiao first, then Pei Cup. Now there are Chao Ci and his own mountain master. Qin Lingjun clicked his tongue. The old cook is strong, he can say such big words without drinking. Zhu Lian said, in the words of Brother Dafeng, even someone like Zhou Xian who doesn't seek to make progress, why can't he have a drink with Jing Qing? Zheng Dafeng really felt that Zhou Qian's boxing was not strong enough, and Zhu Lian also felt that Zhou Qian wasn't cruel enough to herself. With today's martial arts achievements she was just stepping on the skin of a watermelon. Qin Lingjun was not happy when he heard it. Old cook, what you said is hurting friendship. Zhu Lian asked, what Zheng Dafeng said, is it my fault? Qin Lingjun grinned and said, how do I know if you are framing the blame and provoking my brotherhood with Brother Dafeng? Zhou Xian raised his head and looked out of the courtyard. The blue-shirt Qin Pingon waved at him, indicating that the old cook didn't need to get up. Qin Lingjun got up quickly and went to take credit. Zhou Xian reminded with a smile, "Don't pat on the shoulder casually this time." Qin Lingjun trotted to the courtyard gate, turned around and asked curiously, "What do you mean?" Zhou Xian lay back on the rattan chair, shook the fan and said lazily, "Forget it, just be happy." Zhou Xian may be able to teach Qin Lingjun 98 principles on 100 things, but only in the two matters of making friends and entertaining guests. At the gate of the mountain, the Taoist priest Xianwei was awakened by the thunderous snoring of Zheng Dafeng next door, and when he was no longer sleepy he simply moved a chair and sat under the archway of the mountain gate, reading through the book under the moonlight. Millet slept late today and went out to play when he had nothing to do. If he didn't pay attention he could see Pei Qian coming home. Anyway, it wasn't a mountain patrol, so the little girl in black didn't bring a golden pole or a green bamboo stick. She just carried a cotton satchel and jumped to the side of the mountain road. Suddenly she saw the figure at the foot of the mountain. At the gate of the mountain, after finishing the work, he raised his hands and sank into his dantian, smiled and called out to the Daoist master Xianwei. Xianwei agreed, rolled up the book and put it in his sleeve with lightning speed, and then took out a volume of sage books from the other sleeve. Only then did Xianwei turn his head and the grains of millet flew all the way down the mountain, and Xianwei wanted to get up and move a bench from the table. Millet grains squatted aside, waved repeatedly and said no, just squatting. The little girl asked, "Will it not delay the reading of the book by Daoist Xianwei?" Xianwei smiled and said, "How is that possible? Zhu Lian and Mi Dajiangxian, especially the old cook, still don't know anything because in the early years a certain absolute between the two sides about some beautiful women on the street and girls in embroidered buildings was relayed to the home by Xiaoli a while ago. The good man of the mountain master. Only then did they meet in the capital of Nanyuan to ask each other about boxing. You are more eloquent than each other, you dare to speak out on the millet side, so you are not afraid to teach my millet a bad thing, right? Therefore in Qingping sword sect, Mi Dajiangxian always felt that the hidden officer saw him and he often sneered on his face. Mi was a little confused at that time and he didn't know what he did wrong again. It's just that Mi Dajiangxian didn't bother to look into this. Anyway, he didn't have much to do, so he just thought it was a dead pig, not afraid of being scalded by boiling water. Whether it's in the Chunfan's high account or in the summer palace, he is the most idle. What's more, he was ridiculed by those young swordsmen as, "Half the credit goes to me you." As for who spoke first, Dong Bu, Lin Junbai or Gu Chonglong's fair words were all arbitrary. Millet Grain asked in a low voice, "Xianwei Daoist can't sleep, are you missing your hometown? The book says don't forget your hometown, benevolence. Do not love the homeland also." Xianwei rolled up the books that were supposed to be pretentious, thought for a while and smiled. So according to this principle it is normal for a wandering child to miss his hometown, but he is just discussing life outside, and he also needs to be open-minded. Millet nodded, clapping vigorously but silently. It makes sense, Daoist Xianwei's words speak to my heart. Ah, such a good reason, I want to close the door and get along with it, but I can't. Let it sneak away. Xianwei snorted and tapped the palm of his hand with the scroll. The truth of millet grains seems to be better said learned and learned. Seeing that Daoist Xianwei was in a good mood, Xiaomi Li scratched his face and asked, "Daoist Xianwei, can you pull the arrow? Sounds so good, I always think that when there are many people during the day, I'm too embarrassed to speak." Xianwei nodded with a smile and immediately got up. "Wait a moment, I'll go get the arrow." Some people cheer, why not? In their own Luopao mountain, who doesn't like millet grains? In the past years of wandering around the world alone, forced to make a living, Xianwei, who pretended to be a Taoist priest and whose real name was Nianjing, actually learned some craftsmanship and made money by playing chess with others, just one of them. Arrow will be pulled very early, but when we got to Luopao mountain, the Taoist Xianwei didn't think about it, and he didn't have the chance to resume his old business. It was just that he was in Zhu Lian's courtyard and listened to the old cook sitting on the bench to pull it. Once Xianwei was so fascinated by it that he was astonished, so he consulted with Zhu Lian humbly a few times, and Zhu Lian gave the arrow to Xianwei. In fact, the multi-talented old cook, not to mention the arrow, is the one-handed pipa that is mostly played by women. Zhu Lian can play it amazingly, especially with the soft and glutinous Pingtan women's opera. Do the best of love between men and women. It's a pity that it is said that Zhu Lian has his own particular attention, often only when Xiaomi and Qin Wanshu are present, There are no outsiders, and the two little girls open their mouths and want to listen, and he will play with them, which he says is not worth mentioning. Bug carving tricks. Xianwei always felt that if Mr. Zhu was a little better when he was young, he didn't need to be handsome. Once overheard a conversation, fellow Daoist Jingqing asked Zhou Xian, "Old cook, is there anything you can't do?" In fact, many people have long wanted to ask this question. Zhou Xian laughed and scolded, "Bullshit, of course." Qin Lingjun looked incredulous. "For example?" The old man smiled and said, "Have a child." On the moonlit night, the Taoist priest Xianwei hurried back to the house to fetch the eru and sat on the bamboo chair. Xianwei coughed a few times, moistened his throat, and lowered his head to adjust the strings a few times. The Taoist priest plucks the strings and sings quietly, and the Taoist priest sings more and more quietly. When Xianwei closed his eyes, raised his head slightly, smiled and sang the phrase, "I would like to turn my heart to the bright moon, but the bright moon only shines on the ditch," in an old-fashioned opera. Even if Xiaomi Mili has heard it a few times, he still thinks that the Daoist immortal captain at this moment can sing well. It's beautiful. Regarding this statement, Pei Qian joked about millet grains before, but only the old cook said that her teaching method was very knowledgeable. On the other side of the mountain road, the boy in Xingyi raised his arm and shouted loudly, and Qin Pingon knocked down a chestnut. Xianwei quickly stopped pulling the eru, embarrassed. Millet turned her head, put her finger to her mouth, and motioned Jingqing not to disturb Xianwei Daoist. Qin Pingon just chatted with Xianwei at the door, glanced at the direction of the town, and quickly returned to the mountain with Qin Lingjun. On the mountain just now, Xiaomo has taken Xiago to the worshipping sword platform. Xiaomo gave a reason and there was no hiding. Although Xiago was reluctant, he just thought that the leader of the Guo Alliance was there, so he pinched his nose and went to the worshipping station. On the way to Yufeng, she was still complaining about the mountain owner who made a big fuss. She didn't know her friendship in a certain old yellow calendar. She had a good relationship with two of the upcoming guests. Xiaomo, however, knew her to the bottom of his heart, and debunked Xiago's open-mouthed lie on the spot and said with a smile, "Hello? There is no problem with the old word, but it is really not good. Back then, when you were murderous and asked those two scholars about the sword how good your relationship was. As long as Xiaomo is with him, he doesn't care about Qin Pingon." Xiago held the mink hat with both hands. He had nothing to say. "Xiaomo, do you have anyone you are afraid of?" Xiaomo doesn't say much, but the little master can definitely count as one. In those ancient days, Jianxiu Xiaomo and Bai Jing were both extremely famous masters who were not afraid of trouble. Fewer friends, more feuds. Xiago had a bitter face, a little aggrieved, and said that "I can't beat Li Xing and I can't find this place." Xiaomo smiled and said that there is no need to find this kind of place. Xiago said that "Next time I go to Lotus Root Blessed Land, I will accompany me." Xiaomo hesitated for a moment and said that "I would say hello to the sun." Xiago jumped on the sea of clouds. His mink hat was shaking and his coat was fluttering. Xiaomo walked with her with a smile, but the childish behavior of the sable-cap girl, Xiaomo naturally couldn't do it. She just followed and watched. On the border of Suian County, Yenzhou Prefecture, on the banks of the Ximei River, Yuan Tianfeng, a white-robed superintendent of Dali Qintian, was walking with a senior on the mountain whose surname was Lu Mingyu, whose name was Zijuan and Jujuan. The latter has a youthful appearance and his body is full of rich bookishness. Even if he is deliberately restrained, he cannot hide it. Therefore, he had to use a magical method that isolated the heaven and the earth, but did not prevent the two places of well water and river water from connecting with each other. This kind of situation is a bit similar to going out to sea to visit immortals. When Lu Feng was walking, he was habitually hunched and could not straighten his waist. In the eyes of the common people in the market, it may be a good-looking young man. How can he be hunchbacked at a young age? Yuan Tianfeng had read Feng Shui Kanyu before and suggested that a local sage who was born in a scholarly family should build Kueishing Pavilion to gather purple energy, and finally left 3 prophecies. The second in the list is the pioneer, and the champion will follow. One, if you get 2 ranks, you will get 3 yuan per 100 miles. Ziqi comes from the east and Kueishing radiates everywhere. From the beginning to the end, Lu Bing just smiled and stood by without saying a word. Yuan Tianfeng asked, "Mr. Zijuan, do you think it's a little inappropriate for me and Daozu to borrow Ziqi with words?" Lu Bing smiled and shook his head. "There's nothing wrong with it, it's fine, Mr. Yuan is an expert." Yuan Tianfeng reluctantly said, "It's okay for others to say that I am an expert. When you say this, You always feel that you are ridiculing the juniors for their poor academic skills. Lu Yan said, that's because Mr. Yuan thinks too much. Yuan Tianfeng changed the subject. Why do you like to call yourself a barnyard officer? Lu Yan replied, the knowledge that is abandoned and not used, the more difficult it is to enter the hall of elegance, and the time is also fate. Yuan Tianfeng said, since the ancient times, the students of later generations should not have gone to extremes like this. Lu Bing smiled and said, the praise I had in the past I was not blessed at the time. The infamy of later generations I can't afford it. The consequences are what I look like now. As small as a country's official language, as large as a continent's elegant language, in fact the Confucian temple has once and the only time promulgated the world, a general year name for the vast and 9 continents, the first year. Yuan Tianfeng sighed, there is a question he is too curious to know but it is not appropriate to ask. Legend has it that when the Hauran world was first settled, there were people who fought against the most holy master in court. The two did not agree with each other, and the Tao was different and did not conspire with each other. As if guessing Yuan Tianfeng's thoughts, Lu Yan said, I am not that person so I won't delay your meeting. Yuan Tianfeng asked a slightly less taboo question. Did Mr. Zijuan ever stay in Liju Cave for some time? Lu Yan nodded and said, at the invitation of Qingtong Tianjun, there was such a spectacle and, it can be regarded as a kind of protector, but it's not too long and he'll leave soon. Yuan Tianfeng sighed, and when he got this definite answer, it made sense for some of the joints that had been puzzling before. It's nothing. Over the past 10,000 years with several different identities I have traveled a lot. The years in Liju Cave were just a flick of a finger. Lu Yan said with a smile, Master Lu's Destiny chapter. There was the beginning of the stinging insect and I was shocked by the thunder. People of my generation who love wine, drink mellow like a stinger Sue. Let's go find a small restaurant for supper, let's go to the stall and have a drink. A group of people quietly came to Huaihuang County in the dark. Divided into 2 groups, Exen Jian took his friends to see the Lock Dragon well, then came to an alley and said with a smile, Brother Duanjing, this is Riding Dragon Alley. A burly man called Righteous by Exen Jian with an iron sword hanging from his waist. Although he is wearing a Confucian shirt, he is more like a jerk. This person is the scholar at the Zhongtu Confucian temple, who arranged for him to be the abbot of Beiyue Mountain for the ceremony. The other 3 scholars of the same seniority stopped at the place commonly known as the Crab Square by the people of the small town. One of them is from outside. He once met the last hidden official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and he was the accountant who was in charge of the money bag among the scholars in the early years. It is extremely wealthy and wise, so among the ancient scholars, it is an outlier. There were 2 beside him, one of them looked dull with a water ladle hanging from his waist. The other person walking along the way hardly spoke. The scholar with the water scoop hanging on his waist sighed softly, I have more than my heart but not enough strength. If Duanzheng was not in the wilderness he would definitely come here and help Qi Jingchun. Another scholar looked up at one of the plaques and said, I will do my part but that's all. Seeking benevolence and a scholar's background. Then he glanced at the sky and muttered to himself, there was a 3 feet above his head. Unless you don't say anything you have to be right. The 3 of them just walked past Xinghua Alley and Mud Bottle Alley one by one. What he saw and heard was different from the other 2 brothers, except that he saw some past deeds of the silly boy, the strawshoe boy and the slug, all of which were related to the word filial piety. I also heard a certain murmur from Sword Immortal Chao Shi in the ancestral house. He turned his head to look at the accountant and said with a smile, You are different from us. You are in the Qingming world. After staying for so long, can you gain anything? The accountant said with a smile, After all, you are bound. In addition to being good at managing money, you need to know that this person can also be regarded as the world's first-class vertical and horizontal family. When are we going to Luapa Mountain? The accountant asked himself and answered, Let's see when Duanjing will leave. I heard that there are 2 old friends on the mountain over there, so we would like to persuade us to fight. In the daytime today, Xing Dafeng went down the mountain to the town and found the Yang family pharmacy. He didn't know what was on his hair, it was shiny and shiny. Xing Dafeng paced into the shop. Where's that girl Rouge? Shi Lingshan, who was looking at the shop, said angrily, You also know that there are other people from the same family. Took so long to come back to the hometown. Senior sister went out for a long trip. Xing Dafeng leaned against the counter. Does Xiao know when she will be back? Sure, Xian has a stinky face. This titular senior brother has no righteous behavior all day long, and he likes which pot can't be opened without lifting it. Shake your head in the pot and you can cook, and you don't need to buy half a tail throughout the year. Oil. This is still a who was born in Taoya Lane, and his words are already so pleasant. Jing Dafeng has never seen any strong winds or waves in his life. This kind of strange remark is ticklish. No matter how big or small, how can you talk to senior brother? In fact, Jing Dafeng had already guessed that the junior sister Su Dian was instructed by the master to go to Qingming World to find another senior brother, Xia Xinan. Jing Dafeng casually chatted with Shi Lingshan at the pharmacy, walked out the door, put his hand in front of him and looked up at the sun. After hesitating for a while, he walked out of the town, past the stone arch bridge, and came to a small mountain bordering the mountains to the west. Jing Dafeng was sitting on the ridge, and behind him was a small grave without a tombstone. From this side you can see the Dragon-Beard River. The tomb behind is the sissy potter who was miserable in his life as if there was no place to stand, and he didn't occupy much land when he died. And his niece is Su Dian, nicknamed Rouge. Jing Dafeng believed that before Su Dian left Howren World, he must have come here to talk to his uncle who depended on each other for life. Jing Dafeng got up and took out a jug of wine, squatted on the grave and fell to the ground 3 times, finishing the jug of wine. He got up again and threw the empty jug far into the river. Sitting on the ridge again, Jing Dafeng took a deep breath and shouted in his heart, "Lu Chen, I know you can hear me, come and sit down." After a while, a young Taoist priest wearing a lotus crown appeared at the foot of the mountain, spread his feet and ran up the mountain sweating profusely and sat beside Jing Dafeng. Headmaster Lu raised his palm, fanned the wind vigorously and panted, "I'm exhausted." Jing Dafeng extended his thumb to Headmaster Lu. "You can come here in one step. Don't you know how to shrink the mountains and rivers to the side of your good buddies?" Lu Chen smiled and asked, "Brother Dafeng, what do you want to give my brother some advice?" "Well, it's a big thing. My brother has thin arms and legs, maybe he can't bear it." Jing Dafeng said, "It's not a big deal, I just want to see what the girl Rouge said before she left." Lu Chen sucked in his breath. "I can do this kind of thing, but it's not good?" Jing Dafeng stretched out his hand to hold Master Lu's shoulder and said with a smile, "As expected, we were born after a few days of not seeing each other. Back then the two of us went to listen to the corner together." Stop, let the past go away with the wind." Lu Chen flicked Jing Dafeng's palm and he didn't move, so he could only say, Okay, my brother will do all he can, do his best and shake some means on the mountain." Jing Dafeng only then withdrew his hand, and after a while ripples burst forth, and a young woman sat not far from them after hanging the paper on the tomb, with her hands resting on the ridge. Before Su Dian left her hometown, this place was indeed the last scenery she saw in her hometown. After talking to her uncle, she finally hummed an obscure old folk song, even for an old man who was born and raised in a small town. Maybe not even understand. Kind of like a prayer for rain with the sky. Facing the king in the west, honoring its rain. It rains, and the sun rises. It must be that sissy named Su Han, who is always humming in a place where there are no outsiders. Su Dian listened to it a lot and learned it. Lu Chen frowned suddenly and Jing Dafeng said in a deep voice, "Lu Chen, I owe you a favor." Lu Chen sighed and nodded, "Don't say anything unkind, just owe me a jug of wine." After a while, Su Dian held a heavy treasure and her figure flashed and she left Qingming. But in this picture scroll of time, a rickety young man in a Confucian shirt appeared very suddenly. With his hands behind, he slowly went up the mountain and came to Su Dian and the tomb. He looked up at the high sun and the clear sky. Wanli said to himself, "I'm tired of walking around with dew, so it's not too late at night, it's said to have more dew. Wouldn't you like to go in the morning and evening, fearing that it's too much to do?" This is a metaphor for walking against the propriety, and there will be humiliation. Headmaster, gatekeeper, right or not? In the end he smiled and waved his hand, "It's raining on the rubber truck, please explain to all the living beings." There is no need to say much about the knowledge of Zhangjiao Lu. Even Jing Dafeng in the Lizhu cave where many masters came out said that he was Xinhua Natio profound knowledge. It is not too much. So the content of Su Dian's prayer for rain is not bad, or the words of the strange scholar behind them, both of them can understand. She used to be a woman and was named Su Han. Isn't it pitiful for the rain master to set fire to it? The rain master prayed for rain, but he still couldn't ask for it. There are often sufferings in life that make people want to cry but have no tears. Instead, they can only laugh and pretend that it doesn't matter, pretending that it is not easy. It is such a man who is full of disappointment in the world. At the end of his life, he hopes that the who takes a nap will open his eyes, so that a young man who has no relatives and no reason must be safe and sound, and good people will be rewarded. After a long silence, Zheng Dafeng and Lu Zhangjiao said 3 words in unison. Squatting beside the field ridge, a young Taoist priest wearing a lotus crown, holding his head in his hands, chewing on the grass roots, looking up at the sky, smiling, this goddess. The content of the chapters in the web version is slow. Please download the latest content of the iRead app. Please exit the transcoding page. Please download the latest chapter of the iRead app. ABC provides you with the fastest sword to update the 1043 chapters who are 3 feet above the head for free. / Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website. WAP. Sword of Coming Chapter 1044. Qin Pingon took Pei Qian, and after leaving the Hehuan mountain boundary, he first visited the Qingbai mansion in Wedgesailing, implying that Bai Mao should not put the Book of Flowers and Birds on the shelf. Then choose the nearest Xianxia ferry called Jiahe, and take a mountain ferry Fengji. At dawn, the ferry docked at Jihuadu in the land of Jiangyi, the country of Qingxing. Since it dares to call it Jihuadu, there is naturally no shortage of fine wines, and it is no exaggeration to say that the whole ferry is full of wine fragrance. Fortunately, there is peace in the world, green mountains and spring water, new and old friends, and people who drink and watch flowers when they go out. The street was bustling, and Qin Pingon, one of the clones, looked at the surrounding shops and asked casually, "Did you know that Bai Xian has a booklet that is hidden from the public?" Pei Qian nodded and twitched the corners of his mouth. "I know, I compiled a hero score. Bai Xian has a lot of ideas, and there are not enough people to make up the boxing skills. First there is the white head of the Pianran Peak of the Taihui Sword Sect, and then there is the Bai Xian of the Luoluo Mountain." "Why are you all so arrogant and arrogant?" Qin Pingon asked in surprise. "You even know this?" Pei Qian smiled and said, "I'm too lazy to know like a brat." Since Master mentioned the matter, she let Bai Xian go and pretended not to know that there was a personal grudge against him. But in fact, Pei Qian knew all the heroes in the booklet. Otherwise, Pei Qian will definitely let Bai Xian experience the real sinister rivers and lakes. However, Qin Pingon sighed and corrected, "How can you be considered a general knowledge and you can't let Bai Xian bamboo basket be empty?" Pei Qian was stunned. "Master, I really want to beat him up so that Bai Xian can get what he wants?" Qin Pingon said seriously, "How can it be called beating? It's just for learning, but remember not to be too harsh." Pei Qian understood and smiled brightly. Qin Pingan's hands were wrapped around his sleeves. When walking, he held his head high and his chest was raised. He was very condescending. The young strawshoe boy was full of poverty and sourness, but also looked very old-fashioned. "Experience, I do not know how high the sky is." Qin Pingon asked, "Then do you know why Bai Xian was the only one among the children I brought from the Great Wall of Sword Qi who did not apprentice?" Pei Qian shook his head and said, "This is really unclear." Qin Pingon gave her a general description of Bai Xian's apprenticeship in his hometown. After listening to Pei Qian, he nodded and said, "Bai Xian is still very good. That time I followed Cui Dongshan to the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and Pei Qian, who was still a small black charcoal, was afraid of patronizing him. In hindsight, the Jianxiu who met in the city head, on the road and in the wine shop, especially the female Jianxiu who was born and raised in the Great Wall of Sword Qi, had different looks regardless of their appearance." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "It's all about one thing. This little has come to Luopao Mountain and said bad things about me every 3 days. He still thinks it's all good things. Someone has to take care of it. I can't say anything to him so as not to be caught. The misunderstanding is a guilty conscience. There is no silver 300 taels here." Bai Xian said that casually, and Xiao Xiaoli listened to it again. Didn't it mean that the entire Luopa Mountain and Qingping Sword Sect all felt that they knew what they had in mind? Pei Qian nodded and said, "Master, don't worry, I will teach him what it means to be really tight-lipped. At least I have to let Bai Xian understand how to be cherishing words like gold." In the private room of an old-fashioned restaurant at Jiuhua Ferry, a young man in a Confucian shirt standing by the window immediately took a few steps back. After stopping, he seemed hesitant to return to the window, but in the end he turned around and sat back to his original position. After taking a sip of wine, I picked up a chopstick and slowly swallowed. As if thinking about something on his mind, a smile gradually appeared on the young man's face. It seems that Qin Pingon on the street looks a little strange, and it is very different from the real Qin Pingon who is similar in age to him in his impression. In the house there was Han Xiaosei who was using a trick to hide her eyes. Today the maid who changed her attire was effective. Han Xiao glanced at Gu Kan's face, but Lian got up and walked to the window to take a look, and she saw a boy in straw sandals with a sword on his back, and a young woman with a ball in a bun. Understood, it turned out to be an old friend who did not meet again. Pei Qian immediately noticed Yu Ye's gaze from a high place, raised her head and looked at the woman who was a little too beautiful. Ling Lian frowned, feeling weird, but the female warrior looked at him, and for a moment he seemed to have no clothes on. As expected of Pei Qian. Such a young martial artist, it's scary. Pei Qian gathered his voice and said calmly, "Master, there is a female cultivator over there. Her state of mind is a little creepy, the scene is gloomy and cold and there are countless bones hanging in the air. She doesn't look like a kind person." Qin Pingon asked, "Does she have the intention to kill?" Pei Qian replied, "That's not true." Qin Pingon frowned and said, "Is it the wild monsters hiding here?" Pei Qian thought for a while. "It's a bit like. Master, why don't I go to the restaurant to find out?" Qin Pingon nodded and said, "Be careful." Pei Qian hesitated. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "It's okay for Master to protect himself." At this moment Han Xiaosa appeared at the window and said with a heartfelt smile, "Lord Yingguan, long time no see, go upstairs for a chat?" Qin Pingon raised his head and looked. It was actually the immortal female cultivator of Beidasheng who temporarily removed the blindfold, and Mr. Jing's junior sister Han Ko's. In her heart she knew that Han Qiao's selves on the mountain were very different from her junior brother Lu Qiqing, who liked to be famous and cause trouble. She was the kind of Taoist who was reclusive and devoted herself to practice. Since she appeared in a foreign land, she must be traveling with someone who has returned home. Qin Pingon nodded and entered the restaurant with Pei Qian. He found that Gu Kan was already standing at the entrance of the stairs in the lobby. Qin Pingon walked up to him and said softly, "Why are you here?" Gu Kan turned sideways and asked Qin Pingon to go upstairs first, and he followed up. He didn't say anything, just lowered his voice and said, "Come here and have a look." Pei Qian, on the other hand, slowed down intentionally or unintentionally, and let Gu Kan walk up the stairs first. After Gu Kan answered Qin Pingon's question, he turned his head with a smile, cupped his fist with Pei Qian and thanked him silently. Pei Qian just grinned. In fact, Pei Qian has never felt any ill will in the depths of her heart for this guy who was regarded as a family member by her master, but who also made her suffer so much. And although Gu Kan saw Pei Qian for the first time, she also had a very good impression of Qin Pingon, the titular great disciple of the mountain, just based on some rumors. Qin Pingon walked up the stairs and asked, "Did you come from the excitement of Hahuan Mountain?" Gu Kan smiled and said, "I just had nothing to do and wanted to watch the excitement from a distance, but I didn't catch up and I couldn't even eat a mouthful of hot shit." Qin Pingon just slowed down a little. Gu Kan immediately changed his tune and said, "When I farted." Efficacy was lying over the railing on the top floor of the restaurant. She looked down at this scene and was amazed. At the same time he found the young woman behind the last hidden official and her master and looked up. Ling Sun smiled and didn't speak and kept his original posture. "The martial artist of Xijing is amazing, but you are not Chao Ci? I've heard that you and Chao Ci have 4 fights in a row and they all lost. To be an apprentice to that hidden official, do you have to be like this?" Qin Pingon entered the room, glanced at the tableware and chopsticks on the table, picked a chair nearby and sat down, while Pei Qian sat beside him. Han Qiao asked bluntly, "Is there any military books that can be borrowed from the Luopao mountain of Lord Qin? Regardless of the level of knowledge and reputation, I am willing to borrow books from Mr. Qin, if I think our relationship is not good enough. I can spend money to buy books to read. Each book is a grain of rain money, the more the better. I don't need to pay attention to the version of the book. The engraved version is fine, the copy is also fine, the manuscript is better, mainly because I am afraid that the words on the engraved book will be wrong or omitted." Qin Pingon glanced at the female immortal who didn't seem to be joking and said with a smile, "Yes, as long as Xianxia Han doesn't feel that he wasted money. The collection of books in Luopao Mountain is quite rich. In addition, the Yaolu in Tonggishao town in Qingtong also has some rare books in it. To say that Han Ko's has requirements for the book version, but since the engraved copy does not matter, then this fairy money is quite easy to earn. For each military book the price is 1 grain rain money, which is a gift. In particular, every kind of Art of War book in Lotus Root Blessed Land is unique to Howren World. However, Qin Pingon roughly guessed that Han Koz's search for the military book was instructed by her senior brother Jing Juzhong, and it was estimated that it was related to her delay in proving the way. Han Qiao said with a hearty smile, "In the early years at the Sword Qi Great Wall, didn't Mr. Chen say that money is nothing? It's a pity that today is not Mr. Chen's invitation to drink, and I will come to the Feishing City in the colorful world. I must go there. Have a drink and see if you can break through with drinking." Han Qiaosa seemed to be playing a riddle which made Ling Sun feel in the fog. This wild female cultivator with the Taoist name Chun Shao was naturally unaware of the previous discussions at the Confucian Temple in China. Before the eyes of the public, Li Xing let Howren many sages and heroes see a small wine shop on the Great Wall of Sword Qi and the couplet at the door of the shop. And horizontal batches. The wine shop is not big, but the tone of the couplet is very strong. As for the content of the horizontal criticism, now many drunkards in the world are fond of saying, "Those who drink my wine can break through." Pei Qian seemed to be sitting upright, but from time to time he used a Pei Qian style move to squint at the female cultivator. Gukin introduced with a smile. "We in Aquarius continent have earthly branch cultivators. She is one of the cultivators in the wild world, and she nominally belongs to the Zhou executives. Her real name of the demon clan is Ziwumeng and the Taoist name is Chunshao. The name is efficacious so that she can travel in Howren Juzhou, and within 100 years, Ziwumeng will stay by my side as a maid serving food and daily life every day." Ziwumeng's eyes are filled with resentment. "My good master, why are you talking to the last hidden officer of the Great Wall of Sword Qi about such secret matters? Are you really afraid that I will be violently attacked by him and be beaten to death on the spot? Now who doesn't know that the young hidden officer has a tricky way to sow the real name of the big demon? I heard that there was a Qi trainer from the Jade Pure Realm Demon Clan who was torn apart by his hands when he passed Licheng Tu." Gukin said, "As for the situation when the 100-year period ends, and whether or not she can return to the wilderness depends on her own destiny." Ziwu Meng smiled and said, "On a summer day and a winter night, even so, the concubine is still happy." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "You actually know about Guxing, but it's not appropriate to use it here." Ziwu Meng smiled sweetly, "Not only Guxing's chapters of life and death, but also the few poems and essays that you have left behind in the history books. I know all of them." Gukin explained, "As long as it is about the love between men and women, she has almost everything." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Since the knowledge of Daoist Xianxia is so great, why don't I match up with you in the future, and let the Confucian Temple invite you to go to Gongdalan to study?" Ziwu Meng was speechless and choked. Gukin smiled knowingly. "As far back as I can remember in my hometown, Qin Pingon seemed to have never spoken harshly to anyone." Qin Pingon looked at Han Qiaosa and asked about it with his eyes. "Is it really appropriate for such a dangerous person to follow Gukan?" Han Qiao said, "Ziwu Meng has made 2 oaths successively. With senior brother checking in there will be no mistakes. As long as she really cares about Gukan, Han Koz is willing to be friends with him." So Han Koz took the initiative to make a toast with Qin Pingon. "I was afraid that Jing Juzhong deliberately used the Meridian Dream as a whetstone to sharpen Gukan's heart, so sooner or later, there would be a lot of trouble waiting for Gukan, and Gukan was allowed to plan ahead no matter how careful, trying to do it early. It's no use getting ready. In short, the more Jing Juzhong paid attention to Gukan's direct lineage, then Gukan's cultivation path would definitely not be smooth. In this kind of matter, Qin Pingon, who is Tui Yes' junior brother, really has a right to speak. But since Gukan is now a cultivator of Baidi City genealogy, Qin Pingon has to abide by the established rules in the mountains, and it is not advisable to talk too much. In fact, Qin Pingon was even more afraid of superfluous, so that Jing Juzhong would increase the chips, and put an additional pressure on Gukan's Taoism. Ziwu Meng looked terrified, not like a fake. The female cultivator was in a state of turmoil. "When did I meet Jing Juzhong?" Gukan said, "Our group is in the wild world. The reason why we were able to get out of the predicament is mainly Chao Ci. I must admit that he has the most credit, at least half of it. I just made a mistake at the end. I inadvertently remembered a reminder from my master, and I was able to help Chao Ci a little, and luckily broke the stalemate balance of power." Ziwumeng had lingering fears when she heard this. Chao Ci, who was in a world without the right time and place, temporarily broke through the battlefield and had martial arts by his side, finally delivered a punch that seemed to be able to open up the world, just right to punch the Ziwu Meng who was in the way. Qin Pingon nodded and said, Mr. Jing thinks like a god and his mind is like a god. In the Changchundong Tian dojo of Qingping sword sect, Qin Pingon, who was living in the mountains for the first time, had a very bold deduction and assumption, assuming that he would one day be among the top 10 in the Four Realms. Which imaginary enemies will there be a battle for the Great Tao? Among the imaginary enemies there is no Jing. Han Qiao said with a bit of a lesson and a complaining tone, Shaoqin, such a great feat, a great contribution, don't say it so lightly. If it wasn't for you, make a wish with that little heavenly master of Longhu Mountain. And Chunqing, there is no way for the three of them to leave the wild world alive. In fact, Qin Pingon had already heard about the general process of the encounter on a narrow road before, and he was clear about Gukan's abduction to Ziwu Meng. Gukan smiled and said, thanks to the hometown of Huaiyi, which has always been like a chicken rib. Fortunately, Zhao, Su and Chao are all common surnames. Before he left his hometown at a young age in the Mud Bottle Alley, the dark and thin strawshoe boy once privately told the little slug to hide the locust leaf. However, Qin Pingon changed the subject and asked, I heard you had a fight with Chao Ci? Gukan nodded and said lightly, it's just fun. Qin Pingon asked, Chao Ci not only reached the first level of the gods, but also handed out the opening punch of the 11th level? Gukan nodded and said, in order to help us clear the way, Chao Ci cooperated with Jiang Shangzhen's destiny to fly the sword. He handed out a punch that was not in line with his own realm and he was seriously injured. Qin Pingon frowned and asked, will there be any sequelae? Gukan replied, I asked Chao Ci afterwards and he personally said no. Qin Pingon breathed a sigh of relief. With Chao Ci's character, as long as he is willing to speak, he will definitely only have one thing to say. Although the Confucian temple left and he fell from the level of the end to the real, Chao Ci became the from the end, and the distance was opened suddenly. Even though it is very likely that the distance between the two sides will become wider and wider, and it will be difficult to walk side by side, Qin Pingon sincerely hopes that Chao Ci will be brave and diligent on the road of martial arts, and the farther and higher he will be. Even if he can't keep up with Chao Ci's footsteps, it's because Qin Pingon himself is not good enough, and he doesn't want Chao Ci to slow down the footsteps of martial arts because of some accidents. Qin Pingon asked, have you returned to Aquarius this time? Gukan shook his head and said truthfully, I landed at the old Dragon City ruins, I went to Shujian Lake first, I met senior sister Tian Hujuan and Oriole Island Zhongsu, and heard Tian Hujuan talk about the current treasure bottle. There is such a place as Hehuan Mountain. I was a little curious but it was too late. I heard that Tianjun Chao Rong had left, so I went to the Taoist temple of Qingqian, the real protector of the country, and also saw Lingfei Palace by the way. The ancestors of Xiangjuan have settled the matter, they are willing to give up their love, and in exchange for me to spend money to buy the Hehuan Mountain boundary, I owe them Lingfei Palace a favor. Qin Pingon nodded and said, since I have seen it, I have bought it and the matter is over, then don't hang around outside and go home early. Gukan hummed. He simply took off his boots, sat cross-legged on the chair, took a sip of his drink, his eyes sparkling. With or without Qin Pingon, Gukan was completely different. Sure enough, it's the old saying that heroes are most afraid of seeing their neighbors. Just like someone who grew up wearing open-crotch pants, luckily made a name for themselves outside, and when they came to their hometown, they were so arrogant with their well-informed neighbors. After drinking sloppily, Han Qiao was still very considerate and suggested to go to the ferry outside the restaurant. After leaving the restaurant, she let Gukan and Qin Pingon go for a walk alone, and she took Pei Qian and Ziwu Meng to hang out elsewhere, and even let Pei Qian see the item she liked. Just take it, don't ask the price, she will pay. The two were walking by a river at Jiwadu and Gukan asked in a heartfelt voice, can I help you with what you are going to do? Gukan didn't ask if he needed my help, because Qin Pingon naturally didn't need his help. It was so before and it is so now. Qin Pingon asked back, how did you guess it? Gukan said with a smile, you are so careful about doing things for others and you want travel in a casual way. Qin Pingon nodded, this is my personal grievance with the Ma family in Xinghua Lane. You don't need to interfere, do your own thing first. Gukan said softly, I guessed it, is this really the case? Qin Pingon raised his hand and bent his fingers, probably wanting to reward a chestnut, but after hesitating for a while he released his fingers, probably wanting to pat Gukan's head, but in the end he lowered his palm and gently he patted the shoulder of the young man in the Confucian shirt. Qin Pingon habitually said in his hometown dialect, "There are many old neighborhoods on the other side of the state city. If you meet on the road, remember to call people according to their seniority, take the initiative to say hello and don't kill people." Gukan was a little reluctant but still nodded, I know. Qin Pingon looked at Gukan knowing that he couldn't be fooled. Gukan's face was helpless so he could only promise, "Do what you say." Qin Pingon patiently exhorted, "I didn't let you squeeze a smile with those rotten drunkards who don't behave like human beings. There is no such thing in the book and outside the book. How can you repay virtue with virtue? No matter how old I get, what I drink and eat in my life will still be full of bad water. Not to mention you, I will be angry when I see them. Look at how many times I have been to the state city for so many years. No worries. So I just said that the neighbors who had a decent relationship in the early years, you can be more polite, especially those who were kind to your family in the early years. Seeing their juniors' children, you can make a red envelope or something. I have a stack of red envelopes in my sleeves so I don't need to put on immortal money. Maybe they all know now that your family's wealth is not thin, and it is related to the mountains, so there are only a few copper coins in the red envelope. It is better not to send it. Maybe it is more appropriate to have 2 golden leaves in each red envelope." Hearing the long-lost chatter, Gukan put his hands on the back of his head or nodded lightly or hummed. Qin Pingon stopped talking. Gukan said, "You can only endure hard life, you have no knowledge. But after you have money you will have a good life and you will pay more attention. If the family style is good, even if it does not show up for a while, the children and grandchildren will be born late, and they will not suffer from poverty. There will be late blessings. It is not just the truth but the truth. It is just that in our hometown in just 30 years so many suddenly wealthy door families have moved to the state city. Out of the water." Qin Pingon nodded, "It's good if you think so." Gukan asked, "Do you know Ma Kuxuan's roots? He seems to be from the ancient Thunder Department? And Ma Kuxuan may have a higher rank than the old coachman who is in charge of the Thunder Department's Jonkin division?" Qin Pingon said, "Ma Kuxuan wants his father's debt to be repaid, so let him go." Ma Kuxuan was already in the capital of Yushuan Kingdom. Gukan said, "You may still need to be careful about one person, Yu Shiwu, who is a very senior in Jinwu Mountain. Master said that in addition to Jinwu Mountain, there is the Lotus Temple at the bottom of the Qingming world in Yongzhou, and there is a Western Buddhist country called the Ancient Temple of Shishan Wuxia Temple may have a vision in the near future." Qin Pingon said, "You don't need to think about these mountain-top things, just know some inside stories." Gukan felt a little embarrassed. Qin Pingon, I'm still a young monk with a promising future, and am still the head of a sect who is about to take office. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Bai Di City is where the ancestral court of the sect is located, and your senior brother Fu Sun is the master of the sect, right?" Gukan sighed. As long as it is reasonable on Qin Pingon's side, it is difficult to talk as a child. Gukan asked, "When will I meet Ma Kuxuan?" Qin Pingon said, "It won't take long. Just around the Qingming festival this year." Gukan remembered something and said, "I remember that Ma Kuxuan used to be next to a Taoist protector, who was the one who took Ma Kuxuan away from Liju Cave and brought him back to the sect. He is of average seniority and his realm is also average. They are neither high nor low, so everything looks normal. But if you take out the identity of Ma Kuxuan and look back at this guardian, you will find that this is actually a weird thing." Qin Pingon said, "I have seen that person before and I had a good impression of him at the time. At first glance he was the kind of cultivator with a very upright body. Maybe he secretly protected the Tao for Ma Kuxuan all the way and then went back to Jinwu Mountain, and most of it is a last resort for the fate of a teacher." Gukan said, "If you say it casually it is a reminder. As for the truth I believe it will be clear sooner or later." Qin Pingon said with a serious face, "Since the speaker is intentional, the listener needs to be more intentional." Gukan said helplessly, "You scold me again." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "When your testimonials soar, let's see if I dare to make irresponsible remarks." Gukan laughed at himself. In fact, when Qin Pingon was in the Great Wall of Sword Qi, he once entrusted a sword Immortal Howren with a good personal friendship to help transfer 2 secret letters to Lu Qiqing of Beidasheng. One of the letters was sent to Lu Qiqing in Liuli Pavilion. The content of the letter, in addition to the polite remarks, was to let Lu Qiqing go to the nascent soul realm after Guqin entered the nascent soul realm in the future, and before Guqin was ready to retreat and break through the realm. Ask Lu Qiqing to hand over the second family letter to his junior brother Guqin, so it is not appropriate to give it early, and it is also not allowed to give it late. But Xing Juzhong deliberately intercepted him hiding from Guqin. At the same time, Xing Juzhong asked his younger brother Lu Qiqing to just pretend that he did not accept the letter. Even if the senior brother didn't say anything about the consequences, Lu Qiqing certainly didn't dare to disobey it. When the senior brother did things, he never explained the cause and effect to anyone. He is a junior brother, how dare he say anything? The world is big and the senior brother is the biggest. Guqin said, I heard that Lu Xianyang is already the Jade Pure Realm Sword Immortal and the second suzerain of the Longquan Sword Sect. Qin Pingon smiled and said, Is he stronger than you? Guqin twitched the corners of his mouth. He's older than us. Think back to that time. Whether it was the pavilion on the side of the road in his hometown or the small temple, Guqin took out the charcoal. Qin Pingon was in charge of erecting the ladder, and Lu Xianyang wrote the names of the three of them with charcoal on the top of the wall. Probably no one would have imagined that, including themselves, they could not have imagined that the three of them would have today's situation. Guqin said, I originally thought that I would be scolded when I bought the Hehuan Mountain Realm. That's why I didn't dare to say hello to you before. In fact, there are some things in his heart. When he grows up, Guqin does not dare to speak so directly. If they were still at Shujian Lake, Guqin would have said, We have one enemy, one is one, and we all remember. I will dig up all the ancestral graves of their ancestors for the 18th generation in the future. Just help them fill in the genealogy one by one. To do this, build a few more latrines next to it. No matter who it is, you can pay for descendants whose ancestors' graves have been dug up, as long as they are willing to squat in the hut, they will give double the money. Increase the price. Guqin will definitely do what I say. Guqin actually sighed, but he couldn't go back after all. Hometown is different. Qin Pingon said, What is there to scold about this kind of thing? Guqin said aggrieved, Isn't it that you have scolded you so much that you have left a psychological shadow? Qin Pingon laughed angrily. I know that you will grow long when you are small and doing things, which is good, but what a big anger. Guqin whispered, Isn't this coming? Qin Pingon slapped Guqin on the back of his head. Guqin just snorted. Qin Pingon said softly, Cultivating separately, it is inevitable that we will gather less and leave more. I will chat with you today. A man, it is best to be responsible for himself first, then for the entire family and the larger family, and finally, if you are still willing, do something meaningful to this world. If one thing is meaningful, it can also make people who do it find it interesting, it will be even better. Since they are all ready to be the suzerain, if you are a human being, you have to think before and after when you do things, and then move after you make plans and occasionally encounter difficulties, you might as well take a step back and think. Whether or not to listen to the truth, whether to do it or not, is Guqin's own business, but whether to tell it or not is Qin Ping's obligation. On the road of life, what is said and what is done is reasonable, that is, the truth. Guqin was silent for a long time. Finally, Guqin asked softly in his hometown dialect, When will you be able to live more easily? Qin Pingon raised his voice abruptly in the same dialect and stared, Then let me save some snacks. He is a person with the surname Gu. Don't care about your head or your shyness when you do things. Guqin habitually wrinkled her nose. Qin Pingon suddenly stretched out his hand, moved gently, patted Guqin's arm and said, The trip to the wild, you did a good job. The little slug in the old alley has grown into a young man facing the wind. Probably didn't expect to hear such a commendation from Qin Pingon's mouth. The mild-tempered young man in a Confucian shirt is like a beautiful jade, and he smiles. The content of the chapters in the web version is slow. Please download the latest content of the iRead app. Please exit the transcoding page. Please download the latest chapter of the iRead app. ABC provides you with the fastest sword to update. Chapter 1044. Dare to have Zheng for free. // Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website. WAP. Sword of Coming. Chapter 1045. One big and two young, the three who have just become masters and apprentices, are walking on a Xianxia ferry in the Middle Earth and Divine Continent. The ferry is located in a remote location, and there is a large ferry nearby that is famous for moving a continent. Naturally, they can't compete for business, so it seems a bit quiet here. Going further north is the neighboring Deduan dynasty. A boy with a big head and a head, nibbling on a freshly baked pie, asked vaguely, "Master, it is said that only the fairy is real for this kind of Xianxia fairy." The young man in white smiled and said, "It's not that exaggerated, but the price is a bit expensive. There are fakes and fakes, but not many. The price of land is expensive and the price is not cheap." Another little girl about the same age as her senior brother sneered, "Zhou Xian, have you eaten a fake cake now?" The boy nodded. "It makes sense, Pian Pian, you are very reasonable. It seems that apart from the fairy on the mountain, the flatbread is also real." The boy continued to ask, "Master, the name of this fairy is very strange. Why is it called Palmprint Fairy?" The young man in white explained with a smile. "It is said that there was an ancient real person who learned Taoism with others. With one move, he pressed the ground with his palm, and the lines on his palm formed the current valley and riverbed." The boy smacked his tongue. "So there are really gods?" Yes, there are ghosts, so there must be gods who hunt ghosts." "Master, are the people walking on the road all the legendary gods on the mountain?" "Doesn't look like it." "What?" The girl continued to dismantle the platform. "Xian, you have only been to a few fairy crossings. What is strange or not? You have only attended a school for a few years. Talk about it? The writing is not correct and you pretend to be a well-informed scholar." The boy named Xian was a little angry. "Pian Pian, if you continue to target me like this, I will compete with you for the title of the first disciple of the mountain." The young man in white held a head with one hand and said with a smile, "Don't be mad at the same door, just talk well." The little girl nicknamed Pian Pian made a face at Xian. Xian pretended not to see. "Master, why are pedestrians on the road not looking at you right? Are you a famous person on the mountain? But you are obviously a pure warrior." The girl chuckled. "I just found out." Their master said, "It's definitely not a big celebrity. It can barely be said to be famous." The little girl sighed and then she quickly regained her vigor and said, "A great deal. Master said so, then you are very small and famous. Alas, a master like you is on the market." "Forget it, since I found the master by myself. No matter how skilled the master is, I can't complain about the master. Don't worry, in the future when I master my boxing skills, the master will be able to touch my light and I will be surprised wherever I go." He sighed and murmured, "Wow, you read it right, that is by yes master, it's amazing. This Zhou Xian has no other ability, the ability to accept disciples, envy, it's really amazing." The young man in white, whose real name was Zhou Xian, squinted and smiled when his disciple called him by his first name. The man, who was handsome and extraordinary, looked even more tender. "Oh, okay master, when he thinks of this scene now, looking forward to it. It is rare for a boy to say something about the master. Master, the master of the martial arts hall next door to our house. When he taught his disciples martial arts, he was very capable and fierce, so everyone was afraid of him. You should learn more, study." The children don't think about it, the master is only 2 apprentices. Who is pitiful when the real murderer is found? Zhou Xian nodded and smiled. "No problem, murderers are not easy, practicing martial arts is hard work. And whoever of you dares to be lazy in the future, I will definitely teach you a straight face." The 2 children, named Xian and Pian Pian respectively, are the 2 direct disciples of Zhou Xian. It was a chance encounter when I met them not long ago. 2 7-year-old children of the same age were neighbors when they were young. They were born in a county town of a small country, but because there was a martial arts gym near their home, they liked to put up a ladder and lie on the wall to peek at boxing exercises. In the most basic martial arts for a few years, no one taught them the real formulas and stakes. Just like these 2 children, they dared to go to a deserted shrine in the mountains dozens of miles away to see if there are ghosts in the world. At that time, Zhou Xian happened to pass by Yufeng, and when he noticed the strange movement on the ground, he glanced down and Zhou Xian immediately fell down. The little boy was holding a short wooden sword and the girl was holding a bamboo dagger. Although they were frightened by the ghosts and demons occupying the temple, their faces turned pale, but they really encountered something dangerous. Vague. The body is light and the footsteps are strong, and the 2 children have faint signs of fisting. In fact, the realm of the ghost and the demon is not high, and they are all cultivated in the lower 5 realms. At first I just wanted to scare the 2 children, but I didn't think about what to do with them. The 2 little kids add up. Less than 100 pounds of meat is not enough for them to stick between their teeth. Now there is a lot of wind everywhere and the government is strictly controlling. It is not necessary to lose their lives for the sake of a meat and a tooth sacrifice. Is it not a capsize in the gutter? They didn't have the mentality of being teasing and playing, but they were really angry when they were just chatting. It's really that those two little are too weird. If you say wooden sword slashing and dagger stabbing, they are nothing, not at all. It doesn't hurt, but when they break the wooden sword and crush the dagger, when the child who has no weapon in his hand meets the enemy with his bare hands, the little girl's first punch will make the monster's skin rip apart. It is furious and can't help it. Killing the heart together is to smash the yellow-haired girl with a punch, but she jumped backwards, rolled a few times and dexterously avoided the punch in an instant. She just stepped on the wall, her knees slightly bent, and she suddenly exerted force. The whole person was as fast as an arrow, and she punched the monster's forehead again. She stepped on the latter's chest again, taking advantage of the momentum retreat. The little boy who was entangled with the ghosts always had firm eyes, and his breathing was even more steady and longer than usual, and he was invisibly caught in a mysterious state of emptiness. It only said that the monster was punched and kicked, took a few steps back and almost exploded on the spot. Earlier he punched the little girl in a violent rage. It slowed down and reduced its strength intentionally or unintentionally so as not to be accidentally hit. The other party's head blossomed, and more of it was thinking of a punch that suddenly stopped near the little girl's head so as to teach her to know the stakes. The result was such a reward. He rubbed his chest, took a deep breath and finally snorted. After begging for a little bit of cheap Daoist ghost, he said something dejected and left. The idea was tricky and he could not be said to be the kind of genealogy trainer who secretly protects the Tao. But the ghost was not angry and said a word from his heart, "Let you fart," and just left? If you don't give these two little a solid beating, the old lady will be out of breath for several years. At this moment, a young man in white walked into the entrance of the temple that had been abandoned for many years. It seemed that as soon as they stopped punching, the two children showed their age-appropriate panic and fear. They held hands with each other and leaned their backs against the wall. Their immature faces were full of sweat. Xianxia said, "Since you can suppress your natural nature and restrain your ferocity everywhere, it is not a fork in the road of cultivating, and it will not be in vain to cultivate well in the future." The female ghost cursed sullenly, "Stinky boy, what kind of onion are you? Dare to make a lot of nonsense here and teach us to practice." The monster immediately walked over to her, tugged at her sleeve and reminded in a low voice, "I'll just say it, it must be the guardian of those two children." As a result, the young man in white smiled and said, "My surname is Chao Mingxi. I'm not a chi trainer on the mountain, just a pure martial artist. I come from the Daoist dynasty in the north." The female ghost snorted and said in her heart, "If you are really Xianxia, will we still be alive?" Xianxia smiled, but when he twisted his toes, there was a vision of heaven and earth. The monster said timidly, "Just treat you as Xianxia, I'll kowtow to you a few times, can we spare our couple tonight?" Xianxia said, "It's not me who let you go, it's you." That's the same sentence. In the future, cultivate well. Those who are cultivators are willing to pay respect to the heaven and the earth. The female ghost was timid and embarrassed and said, "What kind of cultivator are we? You're definitely not Xianxia. By the way, you must be bluffing. In fact, you can't beat us and you want to scare us away." The monster was about to be frightened, turned his head and said with a sad face, "Miss, don't be brave, I will listen to you in everything, but this matter, listen to your husband's advice, let's go." Xianxia smiled and said, "If you don't leave, I really want to leave you two for a chat." The female ghost turned into a plume of smoke and passed through the window. The sturdy monster couldn't care less, turned around and jumped, directly smashing the window. Xianxia knelt down on one knee and asked with a smile, "My name is Xianxia, what's your name?" The little girl's voice was still crying, but her face was still full of stubbornness and she raised her head high. "Walking through the rivers and lakes, you can't change your name, sit or change your surname. My name is Baiyu, it's a big rain, that kind of torrential rain the size of a soybean, the whole world. There are white flowers in between." The boy followed with a trembling voice and said, "My name is Jijia. It's not the season of the 4 seasons, but next to the word he Jiao mountain, thrifty and frugal." Xianxia said softly, "Don't be afraid, I'm a big living person just like you and I also practice martial arts, but I have practiced boxing for a few more years than you so I can scare them away." Seeing that they stopped talking, Xianxia got up and said with a smile, "Go home quickly, you two remember not to be so rash in the future, there are many magical beings in the mountains and rivers, and each has its own temperament." Xianxia was the first to turn around and leave the temple. The two children whispered, and after discussing it, they still planned to follow the man in white who really didn't look like a villain. Xianxia stopped when he reached the foot of the mountain and said with a smile, "I will you here." The little boy was holding the wooden sword that was broken in two, while the little girl was crying silently, feeling distressed about the broken bamboo dagger. Jijia dared to say, "You can also martial arts and boxing?" Xianxia nodded, "Yes." Jijia suddenly became bright. "Your boxing skills are very high?" Xianxia laughed dumbly. He really didn't know how to answer this question. Baiyu wiped his face and said angrily, "Stay Zhou Xian, he must be able to scare away the evil spirits in the mountain temple. He must be very powerful." Xianxia smiled and said, "Whether it is going up the mountain and entering the water or visiting the immortals to ask, remember to pay attention to some taboos, and don't casually say things like evil evil." The little girl was stunned for a while, then nodded, "Whether it makes sense or not, I will listen to you." Jijia had a look of longing on his face and asked, "Then do you know a master of the rivers and lakes? It's the kind of hero mentioned in the book. The nicknames are very long and people give them nicknames. Number?" It seemed to be another helpless question. Xianxia thought for a while, "I know some experts. But I don't have a nickname." Baiyu said, "If you can beat Master Lu from the martial arts hall next door, I will recognize you as a master. How about it?" Jijia echoed, "It's best to just practice with Master Lu, but don't play that kind of gymnasium. You are particular about the world. It seems that kicking the gym is equivalent to entering the ring, just not signing the life and death certificate. It's too scary to listen to. Already." Xianxia smiled and said, "I have to continue on my way. Go home quickly, your parents will be worried and it is estimated that you will be punished." Only in the end Xianxia still recognized them as apprentices. "That night I went to the county seat first and saw with my own eyes one of the two children was beaten with a feather duster and his hands were red and swollen, but he didn't cry." Of course, Xianxia told the two elders about his idea of accepting apprentices, saying that they were very talented in martial arts, and then went to the nearest immortal mansion, and then let the old immortal master of Guanheijing help him leave overnight. On a trip to the county office, please ask the county magistrate to go out in person to help convince the two families to give the two children to himself with confidence. Anyway, the process is more tortuous. As for whether Xianxia said his name, he came from the Didian dynasty or something. In this remote county where there is no contention with the world and information has been blocked for a long time, it is useless to just say this. At this moment the three master and apprentice are walking on the ferry. More and more ferry passengers, shopkeepers of local shops, and tourists who come here to enjoy the scenery in spring. I don't know who is the first to call out the name of Xianxia. It seems to be Xianxia. It's really Xianxia, it's absolutely true. What is Xianxia doing here? It's not just that he looks like that Xianxia, right? Be presumptuous, what name is called, we must honor Xiao Wuxian. The whole ferry was followed by loud voices one after another. That is, no one dared to approach, only dared to register their number from afar. What was their name, where did they come from, how was their teacher? Jijia had never seen such a bizarre battle, so he was a little nervous. He tugged at Master's sleeve and asked in a low voice, "Master, who are they talking about, Xianxia?" Xianxia smiled and said, "If there is no accident, it's your master." Baiyu stomped his foot. "Master, so you are so famous? What should I do in the future? When I go out, I can't be said to be Xiaoxi's apprentice." Xianxia smiled softly, nodded and joked, "It's a bit difficult to have such a master on the stall." Fallen Mountain. Qin Pingon in green shirt has been carefully compiling an inkstone score in recent days. The pages of the book are all made by the old cook. Since it is an ancient book, that is some years old, it must be yellowed and antique. There is no way, since Guizhujiu arrived at Luopao Mountain, Qin Pingon has been keenly aware of this little disciple and is sulking with him. She has to work hard to pretend that she is not angry, and the master is still the best master in the world. Qin Pingon was not good at directly asking her why. After thinking about it, there was no answer that could convince him. Qin Pingon had to find Zhu Xian secretly to find out what the problem was. Sure enough, the old cook had to come out and just ask after a few questions, and Pei Qian talked a lot about Guizhujiu's deeds when he was a child. Zhu Xian quickly guessed the answer, but he sold it first, saying, "Sir, do you remember Guizhujiu hanging from his waist? That side copying inkstone?" Qin Pingon was so touched that he suddenly realized that, indeed, it was his own fault. When he was in the Great Wall of Sword Qi, Qin Pingan lied to Guizhuzhou, saying that the green end material of her Feng Shou inkstone was in the world of Haoran. The edge is a very precious inkstone. If it is all lies, it does not count. At the foot of Haoran Mountain, Duan inkstone is indeed precious. Of course, the green end is in Duanshi and the price is relatively low. Qin Pingan asked the old cook how to remedy it. Zhou Xian smiled and said, "It's not easy. The young master can write an inkstone by himself, and name it by Yan's high extension, etc. Inkstones. There are not too many ancient inkstones made of green end materials. In a 100-square inkstone table there are 5 or 6 squares. It is mainly the top 10 peerless famous inkstones. There must be a clear green end inkstone table that has been handed down in an orderly manner by 2 parties. Can't be more, can't be less. No one will believe it if there is more, and less will not be enough." While Qin Pingan was greatly admired, he squinted at the old cook. "You are the best at cheating." Zhou Lian waved his hands with a smile and said that there are 100 square inkstones, and he still has to carve, copy and develop different shapes and inscriptions, and write the corresponding wonderful stories. It is a huge amount of work. It's up to you, son, to do it yourself. So Qin Pingan returned to the first floor of the bamboo building and began to silently write this inkstone that night. The poor mountain owner, who is used to throwing hands at the shopkeeper, has to keep the door behind closed doors, so that he can't be seen by the warm trees and millet grains. It has to wait until it is done, let them see it, and then report it to Guizhuzhou through the ear, and then it will be perfect. I never wanted to wait until Qin Pingan finally compiled an inkstone score. And Wanxu saw it when he was cleaning the room, and the girl in the pink skirt couldn't understand it. As for the millet grains who often lie in the corridor under the eaves and play with Sister Wanxu, and bask in the sun with the good mountain master, even more did not notice this detail. Qin Pingan had no choice but to say something, take a look at the book, and get up to fetch the inkstone when the warm trees were sewing cloth shoes and the grains of millet were rolling around in the corridor. It was probably Qin Pingan holding the book. They were so used to it, and Wanxu was too focused on the task at hand. As for the millet, the little girl in black looked at the white clouds outside the cliff and looked forward to it. Have 3 heads floated past again? Qin Pingan was a little anxious, but fortunately Wanxu bit the thread, looked up and saw the name of the inkstone and finally asked, "Master, did you just buy this book?" Qin Pingan hummed and then coughed a few more times to remind Xiaomi to look this way. Xiaomi leaned over her head, widened her eyes for a moment, and suddenly exclaimed in amazement. "100 Swords Immortal Seals, the names are very similar." Qin Pingan nodded vigorously and said yes with a smile. Wanxu was thoughtful and she lowered her head to hold back her smile. Then Qin Pingan handed the inkstone to the millet and flipped through it casually. Millet shook her palm, took the inkstone with both hands and began to read it carefully. Sure enough, within a few days Guizhuzhou came to the first floor of the bamboo building. At night she stood at the door, knocked on the door and did not enter the house. Guizhuzhou stood outside the door and it was not in the middle of winter. "That is to say, master, this disciple is stupid and made a big mistake. I won't say what the mistake is, just punish me for not being master's disciple today. If master is not angry, it will be done in 2 days." Qin Pingan opened the door, patted Guizhuzhou's head and said with a smile, "I don't need to ask what I did wrong anyway, a day's punishment is enough." The 2 masters and apprentices who are not yet masters and apprentices are sitting at the stone table by the cliff and chatting casually. Guizhuzhou, who had been holding the hour, suddenly shouted, "Master." Qin Pingan smiled and nodded, "Yes. The world is connected with mountains and the waters of the world flow into the sea. The seashore of Nambuasuizhou is full of majestic mountains and mountains. On the top of a mountain peak, the ancient pine branches are as vigorous as a dragon's ridge, bent and stretched, with an angry expression, the scales and claws are grasped, and the pine needles are angry like a cluster of halberds. There was a plain woman sitting at a stone table in the shade of pine, with a wooden box on the table. She is tall and thin and her eyebrows are slender, which makes her temperament a bit cold. A few young swordsmen stood beside them, their eyes fixed on the scene inside the wooden box. It was the chief worshipper of the Dragon Elephant Sword sect, Lu Ji. The rest of the standing sword cultivators are all among the 18 swordsmen of the Dragon Elephant Sword sect. Because they each encountered a bottleneck in a different realm, they need to stay in the sect to practice swordsmanship and retreat to seek to break through the realm. At first, most of the young sword cultivators wanted to follow the sect master to fight the demon. Qi Tingji had no opinion on this. Just to remind them that they are willing to go to the wild battlefield. Whether they can leave the battlefield alive depends on their ability. Don't expect him to help protect the Dao. As a result, Lu Ji only used a few words, like pouring cold water on the head of the passionate sword cultivators. Out of good intentions, it is understandable to take life and death lightly. But with your current state you still have the identity of a disciple of Qi Tingji on your head, which is not enough to watch. If you go to the wild battlefield at most 2 or 3 times, you will give away the head of the demon clan in vain. After you die in battle, these great achievements will definitely not be recorded on the chronology of the Dragon Elephant Sword sect. In addition, Jianzong has just collected a group of unnamed outer disciples. There are more than 60 people. The youngest is only 5 years old and the oldest is only 16 years old. They are all sword embryos sent by the courts of various countries in Nampo Suzhou. Without exception, before leaving, the elders of the family or the king of a country have repeatedly instructed these children that when they arrive at the Dragon Elephant Sword sect, they must cherish the opportunity and cultivate well. In the future he will strive to become a named disciple of Jianzong, make a list of genealogies, and then enter the patriarchal hall of the sect. If you are fortunate enough to be able to become sect master Qi or the direct descendant of Chief Lu, of course it will be better. There are also many family owners and emperors, who invariably mention that in the future, if the young hidden official goes out to travel across continents and visits the Dragon Elephant Sword sect, and you meet, you can shamelessly invite Chen Yingguan to be a guest at home. It doesn't matter if you succeed or not, you have to open your mouth. Anyway, you are young so you don't have to be too taboo. In the shade of pine, there is a pocket sword box on the table which is actually a vast and small world, and the atmosphere inside is completely comparable to that of a legendary cave. If you just open the sword box and put it on the table, there are 8 swords in the box, thin and weak silk threads like a small dragon winding through it. The small sword box is unique. The old owner, Lu Chen, used the supernatural power of the mustard seed Natsumi, making the 8 long swords in the box small and pocket-like like flying swords. They do not hover in a place but leisurely floating in it. These 8 long swords were named Qiushui Youfu, Deliberate, Qiuqiao, Nanming Yuran, Weijia, and Shanmu by Zhangjiao Lu respectively. A young girl with a ponytail, Jianxiu, leaped out of the Dongtian where swords were crisscrossed. On the way of the sword light was condensed into a line, shining brightly. The rainbow light was straight and pierced through the air, and it was picturesque like the scene of the sword fairy proving the Tao and the white rainbow soaring. Chased by 2 long swords and approaching the wooden box at the sky, the 2 long swords that were chasing after the girl suddenly stopped, and their swords flashed and suddenly returned home. The girl landed on the stone table and wiped the sweat from her forehead. After a while she was afraid. I almost got hacked. If it is cut on her body it must not be cut in 2. The young Jianxiu on the side hurriedly said, "Senior sister, don't say such unlucky bullshit." The ponytail girl named Wu Manyan rolled her eyes at the boy. She sat on the stone bench, fanning the wind with her hand and asked curiously, "Mr. Lu, where did this treasure come from? Accumulate military exploits and exchange it from the clothing workshop?" Within the Dragon Elephant Sword sect, everyone likes to follow the sect master and call Lu Ji Mr. Lu. Lu Ji didn't hide it and introduced the origin of the wooden box generously, saying, "Lord Yingguan borrowed it from headmaster Lu Baiyujing on the way to Tuya Mountain last time, and Lord Yingguan gave it to me." The implication is that this sword box has nothing to do with Lu Chen, and belongs to her Lu Ji. When Lu Chen wants to retrieve this treasure he has to pass Chen Pingon first. Among the sword immortals in the Great Wall of Sword Qi, Lu Ji is recognized as having extremely high killing power, but unfortunately the defense is relatively weak. Now that she has this sword box, it means that she has 8 more swords that can form a small world in one breath. Lu Ji has made up for this shortcoming. Wu Manyan suddenly said, "That means not returning the sword box? I heard Mrs. Yan Yan say that Chen Yingguan is doing business with Jianxiu there. Whether selling wine or sitting in a farm he never loses money, only makes money." However, Xiao Jianxian said that Lord Yingguan has never made any money in the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Lu Ji smiled, "You can say that." Wu Manyan praised, "Master Yingguan is still facing his own people and his elbows never turn out." The young He Qiusheng rolled his eyes, a taste of vinegar in his heart. "What about you, senior sister? Every 3 times you want to go out to practice and you have a lot of knowledge. Who doesn't know that when you go down the mountain you are going to Luopao Mountain in Beipingzu? Wu Manyan couldn't help but sigh. Bai Yujing has so many treasures, Master Lu just takes one out, it's so valuable. Lu Ji explained with a smile. It's not something you just took out, not to mention Nanhua City where Lu Qin is the master. I'm afraid even if it is the 12th floor of the entire Bai Yujing 5 city, such a treasure of such quality is rare to be counted. Objects. Besides, these 8 swords are all made by Lu Qin himself and the names are not random. The successful casting of each sword implies Lu Chen's personal understanding of a kendo. Wu Manyan exclaimed when she heard the words. These swords are actually made by Zhangjiao Lu himself? Could it be that Lu Zhangjiao is not only a Taoist non-commissioned officer, but also good at writing books and he can also cast iron and cast swords? If you add that Master said that Master Lu has 5 dreams and 7 hearts, and Master Lu of Bai Yujing is so versatile. Although Lu Ji was reluctant, he still said a fair word. Lu Qin may not have any shortcomings except that his killing power is not high enough. Of course, what Lu Ji said is not high enough is to compare Lu Qin with Yu Dou, the boss Zhou Xian who owns the magic sword Dao Zong. He Qiuxing asked cautiously, Mr. Lu, since these swords are all created by Master Lu, is he still a hidden sword cultivator? In the eyes of Jianxiu most of them are Jianxiu. Is Lu Qin a swordsman? Lu Ji really thought about it for the first time but couldn't think of a reason. She shook her head, too lazy to think about it. Anyway, it has nothing to do with her, regardless of whether he is a Jianxiu or not. Lu Ji smiled and said, even if not. Jianxiu, based on Lu Chen's speaking of swords, and the study that Lu Qin will build in Yushu City, named Guanqianjianzhai, he must have a good understanding of swordsmanship and kendo. As for whether Lu Qin is in the end, Jianxiu, God knows, don't ask me this kind of question. You have a chance in the future, asked Qin Pingon. He and Lu Qin are very familiar and they have always talked freely. The last time I followed a young hidden official to the wild, in fact Qi Tingji and Lu Ji were just like traveling in mountains and water to collect money along the way, and they gained a lot, especially when they looted the White Flower City with the prefix of Zong, and then waited in Xianzhu City. There are also surprises which makes the background of the Dragon Elephant Sword sect and the wealth of the treasury all of a sudden solid. Many savage demon clans were able to escape the disaster on Qin Pingon and Ning Yao's side, but they met Qi Tingji and Lu Ji behind. There was no suspense. They were either sent by Qi Tingji to go on the road, or they were killed by Lu Ji's sword. As for the real corpses of the demon cultivators after they died, as well as the broken magic weapons and spirits all over the ground, as well as some skeletons of heroic spirits, they were all taken into the bag by Qi Tingji. In the end, Qi Tingji used his personal savings and spent a lot of money to buy 3 pieces of Yushu City sword washing talisman from Lu Qin, and then gave them to the chief to worship Lu Ji, so Lu Ji will stay in the sect of Nambua Suazhou with peace of mind in the near future. In this Dragon Elephant Sword sect, in addition to taking care of these sword cultivators who need to retreat and break through the world at some point, she is refining the 3 white jade Beijing talismans which are used to sharpen and temper the sword edge of the flying sword Big Dipper. Lu Ji also admitted that she was not very good at teaching others swordsmanship. Perhaps only Xiao Yunyan, who was a swordsman in the Jade Pure realm, could teach swordsmanship better than her. She is similar to the younger generation Ning Yao in this respect. When a sword cultivator's own sword training aptitude is too good, he can't understand the complete incomprehension of ordinary people. How can you not understand this? I don't understand this, how can you teach me? Therefore, although Lu Ji is one of the top 10 sword immortals who are qualified to participate in the city head discussion, she has never accepted apprentices in the Great Wall of Sword Qi. The boss Zhou Xian never said much about this. In fact, even after returning to the Haoran world, which she did not recognize as her hometown, Lu Ji still had no idea of accepting disciples. A young man with a square face and big ears asked curiously, Mr. Lu, since Bai Yujing is so powerful, are there many sword immortals? The young Jianxiu named Huang Long is a lot worse than Wu Manyan in his sword training qualifications, slightly inferior to He Qiuxing, and not the same as the rest of his classmates. Over time there has been a saying, if you have something, don't ask Huang Long. Of course it was the senior sister Wu Manyan who said it first and the young man thought it was fine. Lu Ji smiled and said, I think there are quite a few. But if you use Suan Duguan's words, if you only talk about swordsmanship, Bai Yujing actually only has 2 which can be called knowledge of swordsmanship. Plus the main and deputy city lords of Yushu City, Guojia and Xiao Xiang. Wu Manyan wondered, isn't this just 3 people? He Qiuxing said, "It must be Wuxia and Zhou Xian together to be one." Wu Manyan said angrily, "You know so much, when is the Jade Pure Realm?" He Qiuxing was silent. Previously at the Parrot Island Ferry at the Zhongtu Confucian Temple, these young girls and teenagers who often bickered happened to meet the famous young hidden official Xianxia. The genius sword cultivator named He Qiuxing, who had seen the daring senior sister before, had no respect for the suzerain and master. But on Qin Pingan's side, she was so delicate as everyone's daughter. The young man was a little sour, a hot-headed one. He met the young hidden official who was headed back and made an appointment. When he entered the 5 realms of the body, he would ask Qin Pingan for a sword. As a result, not long after they returned to the sect, He Qiuxing was nicknamed Cow Calf. The teenager doesn't have to guess, he knows that it must be a statement from the senior sister. When the brothers use this nickname to make fun of it, the young man is not angry, but every time he sees the senior sister meets and chats, the young man is a little panicked and sad. That's what it means. Lu Ji nodded and smiled indifferently. It's what Qin Pingan said anyway, I'm not interested in these. Lu Ji said, Huang Long, it's your turn to go in and practice swordsmanship. Huang Long nodded, holding his breath and concentrating. The young man stabilized his mind, transformed into a sword light and slammed into the wooden box. He Qiuxing stayed here before, just worried that senior sister would get hurt. As for the kid Huang Long, since Mr. Lu was helping him to watch, he would definitely not die. What's more, this kid is famous for his life and great fortune. Among the 18 sons of the sword sect, only Huang Long, who lives in Fuyao Island, is a Yi Xiu who has left his hometown. In fact, apart from senior sister, He Qiuxing and Huang Long have the best relationship in private. Even Xiao Jianxian, who was in charge of money and wealth, said that Huang Long was a tough guy, so there was no need to worry about breaking the boundary for the young man. There is a waterfall in the middle of the mountain, and the water flow is not large, like a white painting hanging down. A young Taoist priest wearing a lotus crown crouched on the edge of the water, and in front of him was a deep green and secluded pool, in which there were big fish-like boats, which occasionally swung their tails and swam and disappeared in a flash. The Taoist priest broke the dry cake in his hand and threw it into the water to feed the fish. Lu Ji called Lu Qin by his first name, but he didn't use the qi training method of his heart. The Taoist priest was like a thunder in his ears and he had to join in the fun. He Qiuxing, who had come here alone, stopped far away and asked in his heart, "This Taoist priest is my guest?" The Taoist priest turned his head and said with a smile, "You young man really likes to joke. All the people here are guests, so you should ask another question. Is the poor Taoist the kind of uninvited visitor that is not good, or is he familiar with Mr. Lu?" "Friends are right." He Qiuxing said, "That Taoist priest is the one who does not go to the 3 treasures hall without incident." The Taoist smiled and said, "How?" He Qiuxing raised a hand and shook it. "Who doesn't know, in the entire vast world our Chief Lu has few friends, at most one-handed." The Taoist priest also raised his arm, shook his palm and finally raised a finger. "It's not a coincidence, Pindao happens to be here." He Qiuxing said angrily, "You can pull it down and find relatives to build a relationship. Anyway, if you replace it with Xiao Jianxian, I can still trust you a little bit." "Don't talk nonsense." The Taoist priest, "Hurry up and report your name. Which country's national teacher? Protect the country." Chickens and ducks were talking like a duck, and the Taoist smiled to himself and asked, "Why don't you go to report to the elders of the master's sect, and you still have leisure time here to chat with the poor Taoist? Your patience is really good." "Good. As long as you are patient you will be good. Not small." He Qiuxing said indifferently, "Don't care who is sacred, as long as you get to my sect and enter the mountain, you can make a lot of trouble. Take a step back. If the Taoist master really has this ability, even if you are capable, since when you see the Taoist priest, you will definitely not be able to run away." The Taoist priest gave the boy a thumbs up. "It's better to have a delicate mind, and you can't run away if you have a great chance." Rhymes quite a bit. The young man sighed. Taoist priests have this kind of virtue and the realm is not too high. The chief worshipper has a bad temper. It is a good thing to think that the realm of Taoist priests is not high, because Lu Ji will not personally use swords to chase people away. The young Taoist threw away the remaining dry biscuits and clapped his palms. "Young man, don't look at Pindao as young and tender. Hee, I'm not afraid to scare you when you say it. Pindao not only has a personal friendship with Mr. Lu, but also with Chen Ping'an has a lifelong friendship and is a good friend. As soon as he heard the name of the young hidden official, Xianxia became gloomy, not blaming senior sister but Qin Yingguan. The Taoist snorted. Why, there are senior or junior sisters in the same sect. Can't you like that Qin Pingon? These words made the young man not sad but worried. Xianxia said angrily, I don't know anything. What nonsense. Don't dare to talk nonsense. The words in the book, the words in the mouth, and the words are all powerful. After the young Taoist priest waved his hand and gave a big reason, the Taoist priest gave a light drink, pointed his toes, one jumped, and his body floated diagonally to the blue stone by the water. When he landed, he seemed to have a crooked foot that was not stable, and the joints made a slight creaking. With a sound, the Taoist clenched his teeth and groaned quietly, shaking his two Taoist robe sleeves vigorously, bending his knees, one sitting cross-legged, slapping his knees lightly, smiling and pretending to be relaxed. Being able to enter the Dragon Elephant Sword sect and become one of the 18 sons, Xianxia is not a fool, so the young man is puzzled, only to hear that there are guys pretending to be masters in the world, and this kind of deliberate pretense. Low-handed characters? But it can be said that the other party is really the kind of real land person who plays the world and travels freely. As for how to work hard to practice himself, the young Taoist nodded and put his hands on his knees. Yes, your vision is quite good. I think you have already seen the truth. Pin Dao is indeed a superb master who can be called astonishing, talented, and what he learns. A kind of game world, weird temperament, likes to measure mountains and rivers with both feet, and sees all kinds of human beings with cold eyes and warm heart. The world is a master. This time the poor road is too expensive. It is because you have a clean and peculiar roots and a lack of morality. Qian, the immortal predestined relationship on the mountain is deep, and Pin Dao couldn't help showing up and chatting with you a few more words. I'm a little thirsty after chatting. Do you have any drinks? Xianxia sneered. The Taoist priest's acting skills are really good. The Taoist priest asked. Pin Dao is a high-ranking scholar and outsiders will not feel disgusting when they see it? Xianxia was completely stunned by this young Taoist priest's imaginative ideas. If you can only keep the words in your heart, you will be unhappy. The Taoist priest patted his knees and said with a smile, if you are willing to send words out of your heart, you are happy. As soon as the young man heard these two sentences, he felt that he might have met a confidant. Lu Ji looked indifferent, stood at the top of the waterfall, looking down at the headmaster Lu, who seemed to be really idle. Earlier in the city, Lu Ji did say that there was no need to be serious about ceremonial words, saying that Headmaster Lu was welcome to come to collect debts. Anyway, the sect is on the seaside of Nambwa Suzhou, so it is easy to find. You really come. They are all taught by Yujing. Are they so petty? In just a few days, you Lu Chen came to the door to congratulate you to collect debts? Lu Chen immediately stood up and made a bow at the heights. Pin Dao came uninvited. Please forgive Mr. Lu. Lu Ji took out the sword box from his sleeve, intending to throw it back to the headmaster Lu, who started rubbing his hands and laughing. Since the other party has the face to go to the door to collect debts, Lu Ji has no shame and moves out of Qin Pingon to block others. Lu Chen hurriedly stretched out his hand. The sun and the moon can be learned. Pin Dao didn't come here for this, absolutely not. So Mr. Lu just accepts it. This is a confusing account, and Pin Dao really wants to ask for it, and he needs to negotiate with Qin Pingon first. Lu Ji said, since it's not for the sword box, what did Zhang Jiao Lu come here for? Lu Chen stretched out his palm, pressed his chin, and his eyes turned sharply. At first he wanted to give it a try to see if Lu Ji would like to see him, so he took the initiative to return the wooden box of Immortal Soldier rank. But when things came to an end, Lu Chen changed his mind instead. There's no way, who asked his master to let him return to his hometown this time, help by Yujing as a lobbyist, and invite Lu Ji to go to Yushu City to practice swords. Seeing Lu Chen pretending to be dumb, Lu Ji said, Zhang Jiao Lu has something to talk about and he has nothing to do. Sect Master Qi is not on the mountain, so he will not entertain guests. Lu Chen said, there is no need to entertain guests. Pin Dao can go shopping by himself. People who practice Taoism, heaven and earth are home, and they are used to eating and sleeping in the open air. Dragon Elephant Sword sect does not need to arrange a place for Pin Dao. Xianxia's face was full of disbelief, and he stared blankly at the young Taoist priest. Is it really the headmaster by Yujing Lu, who is known to everyone in the world? Lu Chen pointed his toes a little, his body fluttering like a feather. He went to Lu Ji's side and said with a smile, wait until the next time you open the door. Will you take a trip to the colorful world? Lu Ji said, "Of course." Lu Chen nodded vigorously and said, "Then the poor Daoist has to say hello to the junior brother and stop provoke Feishing City." Lu Ji said angrily, "With Ning Yao over there, I don't need to worry about it." Lu Chen smiled and said, "Hello is still necessary so as not to accidentally hurt the peace with the Dragon Elephant Sword sect, because a little profit, too many enemies after all, it is not beautiful. Besides, in Ascension City now besides Ning Yao, there is actually another Qinshi who was renamed Qinji. Among the several old sword immortals who wrote letters, in fact, in terms of word of mouth, Qinshi is still the best as a man practicing swordsmanship, character and life almost perfect." Lu Ji hesitated for a moment and asked, "Left and right?" Since he was asking Lu Chen when he would return to his hometown, Lu Ji was actually asking about a certain dog days situation together. Lu Chen said, "That fight is very strange. It is reasonable to say that the fight has been over long ago, but in fact, it has been dragging on without a result. So your question really confuses the poor." Lu Ji said, "The scourge has lasted for thousands of years, so it's no problem if you think about it." When Lu Chen heard this comment, he didn't dare to nod his head. "You Lu Ji dare to say that to Liang, but Pin Dao dare not. A swordsman who can fight with senior brother you back and forth. A swordsman, a poor Taoist must be kind and call him a brother. Besides, in the whole world of Qingming, of course Xuandu Guanxun is mainly the elder brother. They all say that the poor road is a piece of cowhide candy. It's just that you haven't experienced a Liang's ability to stalk others." Lu Chen said, "I will go back to the wild hinterland and see the battlefield ruins with my own eyes." Lu Ji asked, "Aren't you afraid of being surrounded and beaten?" Lu Chen laughed and said, "The killing power is not enough, let's get together." "Can't beat it, can't the poor road run away?" Lu Ji said, "Those savage beasts don't feel good now, and they really don't have to provoke by Yujing again, lest they be attacked by the enemy. Lu Chen's chicken pecking at the rice, so it's better to have a good master than anything else. If you have one or two good senior brothers, of course you can run the world alone. If you meet a senior on the mountain that you can't afford to offend, you can sign up for a number which is more effective than anything else. A trick is fresh, tried and tested. I remember that when I first arrived in Baiyujing, I traveled abroad a few times. Lu Chen was really annoyed by the other party's entanglement, so he revealed his identity to them. He had been beaten to death before and he stopped immediately. It was livid and even apologized for being a misunderstanding. In short, it was a lot of fun. To be precise, there are two exceptions when I met Sun Guanzhu and Huayang Palace Gao Gu, not to mention his identity. Lu Chen said that he was the new headmaster of Baiyujing. The two fellow Taoists who were separated really let go of their hands and feet completely, and just sacrificed all kinds of trump cards. So Lu Chen and them became friends instead. Don't look at that Shendu Guansun's words. It's a bit ugly, it's a bit of a loss, beating or scolding is love, it's a good relationship. Lu Ji stopped talking. Lu Chen carefully glanced at Lu Ji's face. Her brows were filled with haze. Shouldn't it be? Could it be that she and Liang were in the Great Wall of Sword Qi and had some unknown stories? Lu Chen turned his head and waved at the young man by the water, jokingly said, "Pin Dao is not a peerless beauty of Ronghua, and the young man is such a dumb goose." He Qiuxing left in a daze, a little lost. The young man suddenly became elated and quickly climbed the mountain. He was going to talk to his senior sister. He just met Baiyujing's headmaster Lu Chen and chatted with the 14-level great monk for a long time. Headmaster Lu also said himself, "Big payoff in the future." At the Great Wall of Sword Qi, Qi Tingji, the head of the Qi family in Taixiang Street, Wu Qingpei, who stayed alone in the city all the year round to practice swords, Sun Jun, who owned a private residence of a sword fairy, and Miyu, who was covered by a big sword fairy brother. The four of them are all beautiful men recognized by the Great Wall of Sword Qi. At first, someone wanted to pull Dong Sanging up, saying that neither of us could occupy a place based on the appearance of the two of us. "Brother Dong, you squeezed out Qi Tingji, brother, I will let me Dai Jiangxin get out of the way. Isn't this ranking more worthy of the name?" About Dong Lauer felt that his face was not suitable, so he was too embarrassed to agree. Someone still didn't give up and later went to the old deaf boy to discuss the matter. The old deaf is really refreshing, saying that this is nothing, there is no problem as long as brother Liang you are happy, just let the words out. This time it was someone's turn to play the drums in his heart. He looked at the old deaf boy and patted the old man on the head. "Infamy." Even with such a generous person, there are rare times when he admits that he is not handsome in appearance. It was on Lu Ji's side that he uttered a heartfelt word. I'm not handsome either and you're not beautiful either. Sister Lu Ji, tell it yourself, are we right? As a result, Lu Ji didn't say a word, just one action made the man leave in grief and anger, went down to the city and went to the city to find his brothers to drink. It turned out that she just stretched out her hand, put it on top of her head, and then moved her palm to the air above the man's head. As a result, Lu Ji's palm was still a long way from the head. This is still that fellow quietly tiptoeing. After that, it didn't take long for one of the old 5 masterpieces of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, among them Lu Ji's allure. Lu Ji was too lazy to deal with this gossip. Anyway, as long as you don't hear her face to face, you can just chew your tongue at the wine table. It seems that there are a few trouble-free cards on the wall of the small wine shop, and there seemed to be some texts related to her. Lu Ji also ignored it. A native sword cultivator of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. In fact, in the eyes of Lu Ji, a foreigner Xianxia, many of them are too thin-skinned, too soft-hearted and too timid. There are too many things that should have been said to someone earlier and it was too late to say. Unless drinking. Lu Ji knew that in Feishing City, the colorful world, the wine shop was still there and the tables, stools and wine bowls were still the same. Aware of Lu Ji's subtle mood changes, Yuli didn't go to investigate her specific thoughts. But the ups and downs of Lu Ji's emotions are like the scene where the waterfall falls into the pool, and Zhang Jiaolu's Taoism is there and you can see it when you close your eyes. Lu Chen sighed softly. No wonder Lu Ji is so popular in the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Apart from killing demons on the battlefield, she is never soft-hearted, but also because she truly regards that place as her hometown. Lu Ji said, apart from the surnames Lu, the only thing in common is that we are all used to taking a foreign land as our hometown? Lu Chen smiled and said, you are like this. I'm actually okay, a foreign land is my hometown, a place to rest, but my hometown is always my hometown, a long time, a place where my heart is fascinated even if it is another 7,000 years, presumably after 10,000 years. Still the same. Lu Ji, if you don't believe it, you might as well ask this question face-to-face 7,000 years later, and it'll definitely have the same answer. Lu Ji said, a Taoist priest, I am mine, don't call yourself a poor Taoist? Lu Chen said, it also depends on people. Just like in the Haoran world, the most holy ancestors' mansion and the Yaxing mansion, the descendants of the saints of these families have noble status in the end, so it is not suitable to say the word exemption. As for the world of Qingming, although the 3 headmasters have no children, the Taoist officials and ordinary people with the 3 surnames Ko, Yu and Lu did not say a word about being expensive when they introduced themselves. For example, Al Liang, it is not advisable to say, don't have your surname Meng when he sees people. Al Liang's real name, surname Meng Liang. Whether it is the lintel called the beam of the pillar, or the water bridge must be connected with the wood, the water bridge is called the beam. Yaxing has high hopes for this son just by this name. But at the same time, the character Yaxing chose for this son was buying. The word is relatively uncommon, and the ancient text is the same as light. The word meaning speed together means that speed is bright and grand. Then the surname Meng Liang and the character buying have a kind of meaning of hope that his son will bloom late, or even to hide his ignorance for the rest of his life. Because he is a saint, he hopes that his son will be able to carry a heavy burden in the future and become the beam of the Confucian temple. As a father, he hopes that his son will have no disasters in this life, and his life will be stable. As for why Liang walks in the rivers and lakes, he likes to call himself, my name is Liang, kind-hearted Liang. Presumably, the word Liang is homophonic with Liang, and one of the roots of Yaxing's knowledge is, nature is inherently good. It is better to explain why a Liang was on the top of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, why he engraved the word Meng. Lu Chen smiled and asked, it seems that City Lord Jing has been to the Dragon Elephant Sword sect? Lu Ji instantly looked sharp. Lu Chen smiled and said, don't be nervous, don't be afraid of the sky, don't be afraid of the earth, don't provoke Mr. Jing with anyone who is your enemy. Unless forced. Lu Chen said, I just saw the Qingluo robe on Wu Menyan's body. It's familiar to me and it's clearly using the weaving method of Jingqiqing. In addition, I heard that City Lord Jing brought back the whole Jingqiqing. It's not hard to guess. Lu Ji nodded. Qingjiao is a robe of semi-immortal military rank, but in the wild world, Lu Ji's sword was too ruthless, and it took a lot of energy and material resources to repair it. Wu Manyan was recognized as the most qualified among the 18 swordsmen, and Lu Ji gave it to the little girl. Originally, Lu Ji still had a headache how to help repair the robes. He never thought that someone would bring a pillow just as he was about to sleep. Just as Lu Chen expected, Zheng Juzhong had returned to Baidi City in the Middle Earth before, and passed by Nampo Suzhou on the way. Dragon Elephant Sword Sect. He also brought a famous wild female cultivator by his side, Qingjia, the city owner of Jintue City Road Yunhu, Fairyland. Zheng Juzhong asked her to help repair the robe Qingjiao, which was naturally a trivial matter. He also helped the robe to add to the icing on the cake, adding a lot to the Qingjiao. Lu Chen played with his taste. I don't know what kind of interesting situation this fellow Yunhu, who has a lot of robes including Shui Lian and Banana Leaf, meets Mr. Xiaomo later. According to her seniority in Taoism, can Xiaomo be regarded as half of her grandfather? As an ancient great demon with a very long Taoist age, Xiaomo is also good at weaving robes in addition to his identity as a sword cultivator. Before he slept with a round of bright moon as the dojo, he once left 6 holes in the Taoism. Only one of the veins is left and it can barely maintain the incense. On the contrary, there is a fragrance inside the wall, and Jin Suiqing has merged one of the Dao veins, and will carry forward this vein that is known for refining robes. It's just that in the wild world they don't recognize this kind of Dao lineage inheritance. But hey, race the interesting point. If you didn't follow Chen Pingon to Howren World, I believe that as long as Xiaomo reappeared in the wild land, Jin Qiqing would have to recognize him if he didn't recognize him. Maybe Jin Suiqing is still elated and finally has a big backer that he can rely on. Lu Ji rarely took the initiative to ask, why did that little Imo run to Luopa Mountain? Lu Chen smiled and said, Mr. Xiao Imo made an agreement with someone. He finally used an ancient magical power to take the initiative to strip out his ferocity and ill will, so he appeared extra friendly. It's fake. Otherwise, judging from the experience and achievements of thousands of years ago, if Mr. Mo with a complete Taoism returns to the wild, his temper will not be much better. He only says that all the enemies who have only one Taoism left, how can he going back a few thousand years? If one counts as one, Xiao Mo will ask him for a sword fight. Lu Ji said, it seems that he is also an Ascension Realm sword cultivator even if he survives. Lu Chen shook his head and smiled and said, it's a sword cultivator at the peak of the Ascension Realm. The problem is that we have to add a sword cultivator who is a complete Ascension Realm. Lu Ji thought for a while and asked in doubt, Bai Jing? Lu Chen smiled and said, the thief can fight just like you. She is a female sword cultivator. In the ancient years of lawlessness she was famous for being true to anyone. For example, you regard her as a woman. Dong Lao Jianxian is ready. Bai Zhe returned to the wilderness. Immediately awakening this group of ancient monsters was a forced move that could make the world of the wilderness world soar on paper. Then there is a deeper meaning. Bai Zhe was also forced to cooperate with a well-conceived secret plan. The participant, or the executor, was the first rise of the great demon. I believe that the southern border of the wild world has disappeared inexplicably over the years, and many monks in the upper 5 who are not obedient or unwilling to participate in the war have disappeared. Those who ate them might be a small group of young monks from the monster race who had not been known for 100 years, secretly killing them and taking care of themselves. And after these young monks were full, it is estimated that Zhou Mi will arrange a preacher for each of them. Lu Chen guessed that the final result would be that at a certain point, either they would eat their respective preachers or they would be preachers. Eat them. Lu Chen shook his sleeves. Don't talk about these things that have nothing to do with you and me. Lu Ji said, finally finished talking? When are you leaving? Lu Chen was exhausted and hurriedly found a conversation, stood on tiptoes, stretched his neck, glanced at the continuous building complex of a dojo mansion at the bottom of the mountain, and said with admiration, the mountain and the sea, a weather prosperous, congratulations. A layman is watching the excitement, an expert is looking at the doorway, and at first glance, our sect master Qi is a clean freak and has a strong desire to control. Qi Tingji, who is deeply in the city, gets along well with Lu Ji just because she is pure. Probably a kind of complementarity. Therefore Qi Tingji and Chen Pingon, both of which are too heavy-hearted, are destined to not be able to urinate in a pot, and they will not become that kind of veritable fellow Daoist. Lu Chen turned his eyes away and saw a splendid beauty of a sea of plum trees, all white plum blossoms. The scenery is very beautiful, it looks like a big cloud of white clouds and it is lazy and motionless. In the beginning Xiao Yunyan, the sword immortal of Chunfan Zhai, and Mrs. Yen Yen from Maihuanzi were all just guests of the Dragon Elephant Sword Sect. When they went out for a trip, when they returned to the Sword Sect, they all changed their identities. One changed from guest to worship. Thinking of those plum trees that are not very old, they were planted by Mrs. Yen Yen. Since this Daoist Mei Tao dares to openly call himself the owner of plum blossoms now, it's not so cold. How can plum blossoms smell so fragrant? Lu Chen nodded, raised his hand and shook his sleeves, pinching his hands to count the divinations. Suddenly, a fragrant scent appeared overnight, and it scattered like 1,000 miles of spring. Lu Ji had a rare smile. Anyway, it's copying the book. How much more to say? Today Lu Chen said a lot of auspicious words, no matter whether it was borrowed from the book or not from the ancients. For Mrs. Lu Chen pretended to lift his beard and said with a smile, "There are not many good things to say. These 2 auspicious words are probably enough for Mrs. Yen Yen to successfully break through the situation and become an immortal." Oh, Pindao forgot that he didn't have a beard. Back in Baiyujing, Pindao began to grow beards, and a beard on his face was fine. He didn't look so tender, and he was incapable of handling affairs without hair on his lips. He was always regarded as a liar when he went out. Lu Chen snorted, "New face. In the vast world, every sword immortal in the upper 5 realms, even a loose cultivator, is hardly famous." It turned out that the Dragon Elephant Sword Sect had come to 3 old sword cultivators, and now they are named guest ministers. There are private houses in the mountains, all of them are Jade Pure Realm sword immortals. Among them was a pair of Taoist companions. The man was a native sword cultivator from the Great Wall of Sword Qi, while the woman was from the wild. Isn't it just like doing business buy one get one free? The other is a bearded old man who is described as withered. Seems that he used to be in the realm of immortals. He has fallen and now he is still recovering from his injuries. He has to rely on panacea to hang his life. Lu Ji said, "There may be a few new faces in the future, but you may not choose to settle here." This group of sword immortals who are far away from their hometown, the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and have been around for thousands of years, have been hiding in various parts of the wild world for many years. Most of the sword cultivators used to have the same identities as Chou Miao and Dong Bu, and they often went to the wild for hunting. There are also some sword immortals when they left their hometown secretly. Their realm was not high, most of them were in the realm of Jindan and Nascent Soul. Since it is a task it needs to sneak into the wild, it is best to take root there. There are still some arrogant sword cultivators, who may want to imitate and follow Dong Sanjing's original trip. Many swordsmen have gone and never returned. Even in the Sword Qi Great Wall, where the swords were repaired like clouds, there was still only one Dong Sanging. One trip out, 100 years of travel, golden pills when you go and soaring when you return. Moreover, Dong Sanging also brought back the head of a wild Ascension Realm monster. As the local sword cultivators of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, they have long been hidden in the far-flung sword immortals in the wild. The archives at the Summer Palace used to have a special title for them, Private Swords. Lu Chen smiled and said, "You have to see the young hidden officer with your own eyes before making a decision." Many of these sword cultivators who disturbed the battlefield in the back of the wilderness were killed in battle. Until his death he could not see the city head of his hometown. There is a great sword immortal who saw his hometown, but it may be better not to see this sword immortal. And among the old sword cultivators who returned home alive, whether they should settle in the Dragon Elephant Sword Sect in Nampo Suozhou, or go to Luopao Mountain in Dongbaping Continent, they do have their own hesitations. Among them there are 2 sword cultivators. Qi Tingji once secretly sent a letter to them from Flying Swords, telling them about the situation of Luopao Mountain and Qingping Sword Sect. It is believed that the 2 sword cultivators are now in Tongye Continent. Qi Tingji plans to select the next site in Fuyazhou in the near future. Although Fuyao Continent is a small continent in the vast world, the territory is only slightly larger than Aquarius Continent. But the battle was too tragic. The old sect and the Great Immortal Mansion did not exist in 10. It is easier to open the situation if the next sect is located here. Once Qi Tingji is on the mountain there, he has an excellent reputation. A native of Fuyao Continent, Wuxia, was almost beaten to death on the battlefield by a thrown demon, but was rescued by Qi Tingji's sword. Therefore, during the last discussion in the Confucian Temple of China, Wuxia had already negotiated with Qi Lao Jianxian and was willing to take the initiative to serve as the chief guest of the Dragon Elephant Sword Sect. As the suzerain, serving as the chief guest minister of other sects is very rare in Haoran's history. The chief guest minister is different from ordinary named guest ministers and ordinary worshippers. Bixiao Mountain in Fuyao Continent used to be the largest sect immortal mansion in one continent. Bixiao Mountain also owns the Xiazong, but it is located in Luxiazu, which is separated by a Jinjiazu. Xiazong has a white porcelain cave, one of the 72 small caves. At the beginning, except for a small group of monks who were young and not high in realm, they went to the north to cross continents to Luxiazu to take refuge and entered Baizi Dongtian to practice. Show up. Therefore, even if Wuxia fell into a fairy after the war, his reputation in the Haoran world is far from being comparable to that of an old cultivator of the Ascension realm from the Luxiazu Jinghao and his like. Today the Dragon Elephant Sword sect has a good relationship with the Chunruchen clan of Tongzhou. The current patriarch Qin Chunhua is even a good friend with Qi Tingji. Not long ago the Dragon Elephant Sword sect had just entered into a covenant with the sect where Yuan Qingxi was located and the Sea Rain Dragon sect. The new sect master Nailan Saihuan, in addition to the Cloud Sign who abdicated to become a sage, Nailan Saihuan also deliberately brought those old stubborn monks who were not high-spirited and not low-spirited cultivators. If it wasn't for the Rain Dragon sect, there weren't many who could fight. Nailan Saihuan would have let these old get out of the way. In the end, when they entered the realm of the Dragon Elephant Sword sect tremblingly, especially seeing Lu Ji with their own eyes, it was almost like seeing their own ancestors. After all, as the old saying goes, the shadow of a person's name tree. Lu Ji doesn't like vain human relations and he has no personal friendship with Nailan Saihuan. The only impression is that Nailan Saihuan likes money and is very good at making money. On the battlefield he is not afraid of being injured. Dare to die, every time she uses the sword she is not light, keeping up with Miyu before the 5 realms Qisho later. And of course the old Yuan Ying who is very withdrawn and lives alone in the engraving strokes at the top of the city for many years. One way. So, knowing that Nailan Saihuan was pretending to be a fox, Lu Ji still didn't say anything, but instead gave Nailan Saihuan enough face. Seeing those immortals with genealogy, Lu Ji's first sentence was a question he asked knowingly. A few of you who has killed the wild demon clan? All of them shivered, only one was bold and said 2 words in a trembling voice, never. The rest clenched their teeth and kept their mouths shut. Lu Ji continued, since it's all never, don't come here to hang out in the future. Next time I go to your Yulongzong as a guest, remember to stay away and don't be disgusting with anyone. She glanced at Nailan Saihuan who was full of schadenfreude and Yunji who seemed to be more nervous than a few earth immortals. Lu Ji said indifferently, it's an old-fashioned sect anyway, how much to talk about its reputation, you don't take your own skin seriously, and you still have the face to expect others to take you seriously? Lu Ji finally sneered at the 2 female nuns. What about you, sect master Nailan, Master Yunshao? Nailan Saihuan has a thick face as expected from the experience in Chunfan Jai's account room, but it is Cloud Sign, his face is flushed and he is embarrassed. Lu Chen suggested with a smile. It would be better if you and Bai Shaoshan exchange the blessed land, it will all benefit. In the last meeting the Confucian temple took out 4 blessed lands and gave them to the 4 forces. In addition to Lu Xia's Bixiao Mountain which had already existed in name only, the old dragon city which was also in ruins, the Jade Guizong and the Dragon Elephant Sword Zong. According to the size of the military exploits, the rank of the blessed land is slightly higher or lower. Lu Ji frowned and said, a specific reason? This matter is not trivial, we can't be on Qi Tingji's side, simply say that Lu Chen said so, we have to do it. Lu Chen said, just casually mention it, don't take it seriously. Oh, you still owe me a sword box, but the poor man has a temperament and his temperament is not small. Lu Ji is also not used to teaching Lu, so don't say it if you don't like it. Hey, look at Pindo's violent temper, don't you ask? Pindao really has to say 1, 2, 3 why. But Lu Ji's next sentence made Zhang Jiao Lu obediently swallow the words that came to his mouth. Lu Chen, your intention here is to persuade me to go to Baiyujing to practice swords? I know you are well-intentioned and have no plans. I will definitely appreciate it. Lu Chen didn't know how to answer for a while, so he couldn't help but put his head on the crown, feeling that many of the previous preparations were going to waste. As expected of Lu Ji, the boss Xianxian couldn't even persuade him. There are such female heroes in the Qingming world, such as Zuan Duguan, the senior sister of Sun Guanzhu. Wang Sunday. Lu Chen smiled and said, if you don't go, you won't go. Pindao has come back without success this time, so there's nothing to be unwilling. Every woman like them in the world brings more beauty. Seeing the favorite is common sense, and a man is dazzled by it, that is called vision. So, why didn't Lu Ji of the Great Wall of Sword Qi not fall in love with the country? Lu Ji sighed. Probably people who never get tangled occasionally get entangled. It will be especially uncomfortable. Lu Chen hurriedly said to comfort him. Lu Ji, don't be like this, you're not used to it. I'm even more embarrassed. No, go to Baiyujing or not, you might as well take a step by step, such as one day in the future, whether it is 100 years or a year. Thousands of years, as long as you make up your mind temporarily, you can travel far away from your hometown to Yujing Mountain by sword. Lu Ji wondered, Yujing Shen? Not by Yujing? Lu Chen immediately closed his mouth and shook his palm vigorously. Pindao didn't say it, and you haven't heard it either. Lu Ji nodded. Qi Tingji had persuaded Lu Ji long ago that he would go to Baiyujing when he had a chance in the future, and go there to practice swords. Even if you leave the sect genealogy, it doesn't matter if you switch to the White Jade capital. To be able to make Qi Tingji, who deeply respects meritorious knowledge, be so open and honest with an outsider, perhaps Lu Ji is the only one. Jianqi Great Wall and Baiyujing have no grudges, and even have a dispensable love of incense. They only talk about hanging mountains. After all, Jianqi Great Wall and Jianqi Great Wall have been old neighbors for thousands of years. The upside-down mountain, which connects the vast world with the Great Wall of Sword Qi, is the largest mountain character seal in the world. Moreover, Jiang Yunxing, a little Taoist boy, and the female crown of the Shidafeng lineage also help guard the door all the year round. Therefore, the sword cultivators of the Great Wall of Sword Qi actually have no ill feelings towards Baiyujing and Qingming Tianxia. Just like the old swordsman Qing Quan led the team before, a group of young swordsmen including Dong Huafu went to Shenshao City, and then the criminal officer Haosu entered Baiyujing to practice. Just having this relationship has made this upside-down mountain a watchdog, who has been scolded by some heroic practitioners for many years. Of course, this kind of argument is just a private slander, and I never dare to make a public threat. Lu Ji admitted that he was actually not as stubborn as the outside rumors had suggested. For example, she followed the advice of the eldest Xianxian back then. Lu Ji kept the flying sword Beidu, which was her life, hidden, and she never killed the enemy on the battlefield. Probably the boss Xianxian saw from Lu Ji early that she had more uncertainties and possibilities than Dong Sangying, Qi Tingji and Chen Shi. As for Lu Ji's other flying sword, Bao Pu, it is widely known, but according to Qi Tingji's guess, there is a possibility that Lu Ji can help her find this sword by reading and studying the secrets of Baiyujing's Lingshu, Fijian's third natal supernatural power. Lu Ji's character is not only due to nature, but also influenced by the two flying swords of life, which makes Lu Ji, who was originally pure-hearted, look more and more deserted. The problem is that Lu Ji listened to the persuasion this time because the boss Xianxian has said a heavy sentence and a heartfelt sentence, which is very rare. Lu Ji, you are in the Great Wall of Sword Qi and you only have one chance to sacrifice the flying sword Beidu. In our place there are women Jianxiu who die without saying a word. There are enough, and there is no shortage of foreigners like you. The meaning behind the words of the boss Xianxian can't be more obvious. You Lu Ji only have one chance to not listen to the persuasion, and then you can leave the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Live anyway. Dare not to leave? The truth of swordsmanship is all about swordsmanship. Is your Lu Ji's kendo very high? How tall is it? It's just a sword cultivator in the Immortal realm who has been unable to enter the Ascension realm for a long time. Why don't he jump a few times and see if his head can reach my Qin Kingda's shoulder? Not only Lu Ji, but the boss Xianxian has always been willing to make an exception and say a few more words to all foreign swordsmen. Of course, the premise is that they dare to get close to them. For example, the sword cultivator Wei Enjin of Shengxiantai of Fengxue Temple in Beipingzu, didn't he just practice swordsmanship at the head of the city? Lu Chen smiled and said, Lu Ji, Pindao and Qin Pingan's views are roughly the same, but there is a slight difference. He thinks that your future kendo achievements may be higher than Qi Tingji, but Pindao thinks it is not possible. But definitely wait until you have truly refined the two flying swords of life, and then merge the 8 sword veins contained in the 8 Daomen magic swords in the sword box, and melt them into a furnace just like twisting a twist. The weather of kendo will be very impressive. Besides, Pindao doesn't know what you think and has never developed Qifu. Even if Pindao has seen all the fairyland in the world, it's no exaggeration to say that you have such a small aura. Yes, it's unique. Therefore, in Lu Chen's eyes, the real possibility of Lu Ji is that after entering the Ascension realm, he can go a step further, and Lu Ji may occupy a wide kendo by himself. Lu Ji smiled and said, "According to what you said, isn't the favor I owe you too great? How can I repay it in the future?" Lu Chen asked back, "Pin Dao just follows his own destiny and his heart. What does it have to do with you, Lu Ji? What else? You pay it back and Pin Dao doesn't accept it, so why pay it back?" Lu Ji always felt that something was wrong, but for a while he didn't know how to refute, so he had to say, "I can't tell you." Lu Chen suddenly said, "Pin Dao still has something to do, so he will stay soon. There will be a period later." Before Lu Ji could say anything, Zhang Jiaolu's figure had disappeared and he came and went in a hurry. The absent-minded Lu Ji walked on and on. She finally came back to her senses. "If I want to repay the favor, it's none of my business whether you Lu Chen will accept it or not." Just thinking about it again, Lu Ji felt that something was wrong. On this day at the entrance of Luopa Mountain, several men in Confucian shirts came on foot from the town. There is a burly man with a high crown and a sword. His expression is resolute and he is not angry. There are also dull scholars with water scoops hanging from their waists. After visiting the mountain this morning, she came to the foot of the mountain to chat with Daoist Xianwei, which was one of her daily homework. Xianwei suddenly narrowed his eyes, stood up slowly, his voice was gentle, and he just let Xiaomi sit down, and then he walked in front of the little girl. Taoist Xianwei with his hands wrapped around his sleeves. Just out of an intuition, the fake Taoist priest with the Taoist name Xianwei and his real name Yanjing felt that he had to stand in the front, and he had to treat the guests in person today. The capital of Dali, under the flower shed of the Temple of Fire. A young Taoist priest wearing a lotus crown, lying back on top of the stone with his hands as pillows, stared blankly at the flower shed. Aunt Feng sat at the stone table and sneered, "Don't you think it's rude?" Lu Chen said, "I heard that in ancient times, there were special high-ranking gods who were responsible for intercepting those Qi practitioners who tried to go upstream." Aunt Feng was silent. Lu Chen turned his head and looked at Aunt Feng. Aunt Feng sighed quietly. "Old Huang has a calendar and he said what it does." On the other side of Huaihuang County, Li Huai, who returned to his hometown from Xianxia Academy, lost a nun Taoist by his side and had a friend on the mountain of his sister. But for some reason this female cultivator always said that she was his handmaiden. This made Li Huai want to dig a hole in the ground to dig in. Couldn't persuade her, couldn't drive her away, couldn't say anything cruel. Li Huai complained if Qin Pingon knew about it. Qin Pingon would know nothing. But if Pei Qian found out, there might not be many famous names left and there might be nothing left. How could he be promoted to be the helmsman? The female warrior of the Yang family's pharmacy, Sudian, was already in a foreign land, and she successfully found the so-called senior brother, who was Xia Xinan from her hometown. The first person in the martial arts of the Qingming world, Lin Shi, Lin Jiangxian of Yashan. After Lin Jiangxian confirmed her identity, he asked with a smile, "Has old man Yang explained anything?" Su Dian said in a deep voice, "Master just said be nice to your younger brother, so you should repay your kindness." Lin Jiangxian asked curiously, "Little junior brother?" Su Dian said, "His name is Li Huai, and the master said that Li Huai was the close disciple of his old man. It's just that Li Huai didn't know about this matter. In fact, the master always treated him as his own grandson. The reason why he said that may be the master. I'm worried to put it another way, even if you hear it, senior brother Lin, you still won't take it seriously." Lin Jiangxian nodded and said with a smile, "Li Huai? I remember it. Please remember this book's first domain name." Mobile version reading website. WAP.